Hi, everyone. I come across some pretty interesting debates sometimes, and a lot of times I see a focus on things such as free will. Many people feel that we don't have free will. Now, free will is the ability to do what you want to do. And I think what we're going to do today is we're going to break down some of the thoughts on free will because some people seem to have some confusion over different things. Like there's biological determinism, there's theological determinism, and they're related to free will in certain ways. Some people might say they're compatible with free will. Well, we need to break this whole thing down. And one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to first start off with a Nathan Ormond video. So I'm actively looking at bad atheist apologetics, and I'm doing that because I feel that people need to get out there and look at bad atheist apologetics. Now, Nathan Ormond has made a series on his channel called Bad Christian Apologetics. It's actually just says bad apologetics and assuming that it's Christian, but actually I also just listened in on an open stream that he had yesterday, and and it was funny. I was listening to a bunch of characters, and I will use the word characters very wisely here because they're interesting people. He's got this person like Camille Gregor on his channel, and Pine Creek Doug, and Danny, and all of these other people. And it's funny. They're all coincidentally men. There's very few women are out there saying too much, and so. Actually, I did see Brenda was on the channel too, so I make an exception. But so you don't see as many females out there in this platform discussing apologetics. And I don't know why that is. I don't know why we don't find as many females writing books or anything like that, but it just happens to be one of those things. And so what I want to do today is we're going to listen to part of this video on free will. And I'm going to give you a little preface on this whole thing, what we're talking about. So the deal is in the Bible, God says in Joshua 24:15, he makes it clear that as for me and my house, we will choose the Lord. There's a portion where people can make choices on whether or not to believe. Now, that is the portion of free will that I think is the most interesting. Okay, it's this idea that you can freely choose whether or not you want to worship God. That's the distinction with Christianity and with Judaism. You're not forced to worship God in our belief system. Okay, some other beliefs, like in the Muslim faith, you are forced to believe in many places. You actually could be convicted of apostasy and thrown into prison if you decide to not believe anymore in the Muslim God. There are some other parts of the world where people also force their beliefs on you. So we see a lot of times in India, people are forcing the beliefs in the Hindu gods in some cases. I've also seen cases in China where people are forcing beliefs in the god as the atheist leader of China. And so that's Xi. Xi is one of those people who, if you say the wrong things about him, you could find yourself in prison. And if you believe in the Muslim faith in a place like China, if you're one of those unfortunate 1.8 million people who are called Uyghurs in China, you could be thrown into prison merely for the sin of being a Muslim. And so we see a lot of big problems going on around the world. One of the things that we need to be blessed about is the fact that we in the United States, if you happen to be in the United States or you're in a place that you can freely worship whomever you choose. Some people choose to worship their goods. Some choose to worship their wives or their husbands or their kids, or they choose to worship their homes or their cars or something like that. Or they choose to worship these false gods. Those are false gods. Or if you want to be a Christian, that's a pretty ideal belief. And so I would say that it's a beautiful belief. It's the truth. You can come to Christianity. And in Christianity, again, we say you have free will. Now, I want to say I want to say hi to Janet Duttridge. Thank you so much. Yes, we have free will. It's God's will to give us free will. God bless you and thumbs up. Thank you so much, Janet. So let me explain what the controversy is on this before I get into Nathan Ormond's video. So I'm first going to just make a quick explanation. I'm going to read a little something to you from Sam Harris. He says, now Sam Harris is an atheist, just so you know. All of our behavior can be traced to biological events about which we have no conscious knowledge. This has always suggested that free will is an illusion. For instance, the physiologist Benjamin Libet famously demonstrated that activity in the brain's motor regions can be detected some 350 milliseconds before a person feels that he has decided to move. Another lab recently used fMRI data to show that more conscious decisions can be predicted up to 10 seconds before they enter awareness, long before the preparatory motor activity detected by Libet. Clearly, findings of this kind are difficult to reconcile with the sense that one is the conscious source of one's actions. Notice That distinction between higher and lower systems in the brain gets us nowhere. For I no more initiate events in the executive regions of my prefrontal cortex than I can cause the creaturely outbursts of my limbic system. The truth seems inescapable. I, as the subject of my experience, cannot know what I will think next or do until a thought or intention arises. And thoughts and intentions are caused by physical events and mental stirrings of which I am not aware. So what he is positing here is what's called biological determinism. It's this idea that these lower level movements that we have are somewhat predetermined by our composition, by our cellular makeup. We have to discuss and distinguish this from theological determinism. Now, Calvinists believe that God has predetermined all of our actions, and he's predetermined which people are going to make it into heaven. And so we have no choice to either follow him or not follow him. It's already been predetermined. I do not follow Calvinism. I'm more of a Molinist, meaning that I believe God knows what we will, would, and could do in varying circumstances. Now, I think this claim is faulty at best. Issues of free will should focus on the sorts of choices that are unstructured, non-routine, and complex, such as how we decide to attend our relationships with God and our fellow human beings. In other words, what I'm saying is to look at biological determinism and even to summon the Libet study, which has been debunked by numerous scholars since. And the reason it's been debunked is because they realize that actually in those moments between the time your brain makes a reaction and you make the choice of whether or not to push a certain button, there's a choice. Okay, so his study is debunked in and of itself because you actually have a choice in that 10-second span. Okay, and the other thing that they've determined is this particular study was extremely simplistic. There were a bunch of people sitting in front of a computer screen and like things were flashing at them on the computer screen and they had a choice of pushing buttons. This is not the kind of complex decision that we're really speaking of with free will, which is the decision whether or not you're going to follow God. That is the big question today. The big question on free will is whether or not you choose to follow God. And I do believe strongly that you have a choice in that matter. I also believe that Sam Harris had a choice when he wrote those words. Okay, it's silly to me. It's actually silly to not believe we have free will. Now, I want to say, hey, Digital Gnosis, he says he and James both believe in free will. Excellent, excellent, excellent. And Veckel, hello, always good to see you. I could put links in here. I don't know if you guys want me to do that, if you guys are interested in joining this. And so I'm going to first we're going to get on to Nathan's video. And so we're going to start at the 6-hour mark. Now, Nathan is doing something pretty incredible. Whoops, let me find where I'm going to share screen. Okay. So Nathan is doing something pretty incredible on his channel. I've noticed a lot of growth on his channel. I want to, give him kudos for that. It's a good deal. And what I also notice about Nathan's channel is share audio. Let's get this going. Okay. What I also notice is he makes these extraordinarily long videos. I mean, really long. I mean, look at this one here, 8 hours. This is a work day. Okay. This is a work day. And actually it says, it's look like I'm going to get an ad. So before I start this, let me get through that ad really quickly. And so we're going to just do that really quick. So we're going to get through the ad and then I'm going to zoom back and get us into the video. So rent control, Ben Shapiro. You know, it's so funny in Nathan's channels, I keep finding Ben Shapiro, which I think is hilarious. In fact, Nathan's, he's an agnostic turned Christian, turned agnostic again. He's a Pine Creek Doug advocate. He's a nice guy. Actually, I think he's a pretty nice guy. He's from Manchester, I understand. I believe that's where he's from in the UK. And he is on this channel making these really long videos. And so yesterday I heard a really long one, but he's also doing videos sometimes against Braxton Hunter and Trinity Radio. And I happen to be a fan of Braxton Hunter and Trinity Radio. And so that's what tuned me into this particular video. I'm also a fan, as I noticed he's also tagged in Dr. William Lane Craig. And I noticed that in a lot of his videos, William Lane Craig is mentioned. And so, yes. Okay, so let's see what Nathan and pals have to say. Okay. All right, so don't skip the ad and give me money. All right, Nathan, so here we go.
Particular book, because it might be useful for people as well on this question, just because. So this is a book by a guy called Chris Frith, who is he's a neuroscientist, and basically I
I just, I want to say with this James Fedor character, I don't know James Fedor, and I don't even know if I'm pronouncing his name right. So if I'm not, please bear with me here. But I did see something on Twitter just a few minutes ago. Braxton Hunter said he was going to try to tune into this video, but what he noticed was that James Fedor, out of the last 10 videos James has made, that 5 of them are about Trinity Radio. So Braxton has definitely gotten James's attention. And so I think that's funny. So here we go.
I think like this stuff gets like so heavily kind of misreported on, right? Between
I can point out Rationality Rules is another Christian. I'm sorry, he's an agnostic or an atheist or something like that. But Rationality Rules has made videos also saying that he doesn't have free will. Now, I think that there is some sort of an accountability issue here. If you're claiming you don't have free will to choose God, and it's not a choice for you, I think there's a little bit of accountability. Okay, so here we go.
Like, especially in apologetic circles where people are arguing for completely different things. Most of the work that science...
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I just noticed something. I'm not going to be like a squirrel here. Sorry, my attention is getting crazy. But Digital Gnosis says James made a response to me. So I'm going to have to watch that too. Oh my gosh, how funny. Okay, so here we go.
Scientists do is of little interest outside a very narrow circle of other scientists in the same field. This is true for physicists as for psychologists. It is said that the great majority of research papers are read by fewer than 10 other people. Many papers are never read at all, but occasionally an observation is made that is so startling that it is discussed widely outside the field of science. One such observation was published in 1983 by Benjamin Libet and his colleagues. The experiment was delightfully simple. All the person in the experiment had to do was lift one finger whenever he or she felt the urge to do so. At the same time, electrical activity in the brain was measured using EEG equipment. It was already well known that there is characteristic change in this activity just before someone spontaneously makes any movement like lifting a finger. This change in activity is very small, but it can be detected by combining measurements from many movements. The change in brain activity can be detected up to a second before the finger is actually lifted. The novel aspect of Libet's study was that he asked his volunteers to tell him when they had the urge to lift their finger. They did this by reporting the time that was displayed on a special clock at the moment that they had the urge. The urge to lift the finger occurred about 200 milliseconds before the finger was actually lifted. But the key observation that caused so much fuss was that the change in brain activity occurred about 500 milliseconds before the finger was lifted. So brain activity indicating that the volunteer was about to lift a finger occurred about 300 milliseconds before that volunteer reported having the urge to lift his or her finger. The implication of this observation is that by measuring your brain activity, I can know that you're going to have the urge to lift your finger before you know it yourself. This result has had such vast impact outside psychology because it seems to show that even our simplest voluntary actions are predetermined. We think we are making a choice when in fact our brain has already made the choice. Our experience of making a choice at that moment is therefore an illusion, and if we are deluded in thinking that we are making choices, then we are also deluded in thinking that we have free will.
Okay, so I want to point out a couple of things. Just like I mentioned before, this is a very simplistic task. And so in the literature, and one of the things that I do in my work and I have studied before is this distinction between routine and non-routine, structured and unstructured, complex and simple. Okay, so you'll see right here, this is a very routine, simple, non-complex, structured sort of an act. So for example, in the morning when you wake up, many of you have a routine. You get up, you get out of bed, you go brush your teeth, you do something without even really thinking about it so much. Sure, some of that could be predetermined inside of your body as far as reacting, or Pavlov's dog's sort of response, behavioral ism. So it's looking at different sort of things that are determined possibly. Okay, but now when we're getting to the really interesting stuff, we're talking about complex, unstructured, and non-routine acts, such as deciding whether or not you're going to believe in God, which has been hardwired in you. Okay, God has actually already implanted the knowledge of him and Jesus Christ's resurrection within your heart. That's why he says you will confess that you believe in Jesus. Okay, it says confess. It's very specific on that. Most of the English translations say the word confess, and that's because this idea that you already have that knowledge. Now here's what I want to say as far as the debunking of Libet. So here's what Steve Taylor in 2017 has summed up this research as follows. In the Libet experiments, participants were asked to press a button or flex their wrists while EEG electrodes attached to their heads monitored their brain activity. Participants' brains registered activity, which was unconscious to the participants before they made conscious decisions. Libet referred to this activity as readiness potential. He interpreted that to mean that decisions were first made within participants' brains before they were conscious of such decisions. Yet, though this experiment has become famous, and atheists such as Harris and Dennett have enthusiastically cited his research to claim we have no free will, numerous scholars have refuted the Libet studies. Scholars have questioned whether the activity in the brain is associated with the decision to move or even not move. They have also questioned whether the particular area of the brain in which the activity occurred, the supplementary motor area, is active when performing tasks. The supplementary motor area is usually active while imaging activities, while not performing them. To focus more on choices and outcomes, participants in a more recent study by Soon, Brass, Hines, and Haynes in 2008 were asked to fixate on the center of a screen where a stream of letters was presented. When they felt the urge, they pushed one of two buttons. Then they were taken to another screen where they were prompted to recall the letter they picked and to press a second button. The study, like the Libet study, focused only on low-level motor or memory skills. As the philosopher, now I'm quoting Taylor here directly, as the philosopher Alfred North Whitehead pointed out, ironically, scientists animated by the purpose of proving themselves purposeless constitute an interesting subject for study, end quote. In my view, this is connected to the general nihilism of our culture, the collapse of values which has followed from materialistic science. Such absurd views could only arise and make any kind of sense amidst the climate of meaninglessness and confusion that scientific materialism has given rise to. Now, that is a quote from Taylor within the quote with Alfred North Whitehead. And so I think that's pretty fascinating stuff. So here we go. I want to say hi to everybody in the chat. I'm watching the chat. I see Digital Gnosis, Ghostlight, Ronan Kanushi. Who else we see here? I saw Janet earlier. So here we go.
But does this result really demonstrate that we have no free will? One problem is that the choices involved are very trivial. It doesn't matter what you choose. In Libet's original experiment, you simply had to decide when to lift one finger. In other experiments, you might be given more freedom and be asked to choose between the left and right finger, but these actions are deliberately chosen because they are trivial. With such acts, we can look at the process of choosing without interference from social pressures or moral values. The triviality of the action does not alter the fact that when you take part in the experiment, you have to decide for yourself precisely when to lift your finger. So Libet's result still stands. At the moment at which we think we are choosing an action, our brain has already made the choice. But this does not mean that the action has not been chosen freely. It simply means that we were not aware of making the choice at that earlier time. As we shall discover in Chapter 6, our experience of the time at which actions occur does not bear a fixed relationship to what is happening in the physical world. These unconscious choices are just like Helmholtz's unconscious inferences. We do not perceive the object in front of our eyes until the brain has made unconscious inferences about what that object may be. We are not aware of the action we're about to perform until the brain has made an unconscious choice about what that action should be. But this action is determined by a choice that we have previously made freely and deliberately. We have agreed to cooperate with the experiment. We may not know precisely which action we are going to perform in any one moment, but we have already selected the small set of actions from which this precise action shall be selected. And then just later on in the book, because he did some research on this himself as well, following up on the question. I don't know if maybe it's turning people off me just randomly sort of reading sections, but on Braxton, some of the things Braxton said, there are issues with the experiment and what you can conclude about free will from it. But in terms of what Braxton said about it, them priming people to like report a certain time or whatever, well, he talks about how in some of his experiments that he did, some of the the people involved in like conducting the experiment did accidentally prime the people for like a time frame within which to move their finger. But when they did that, they found out that that did actually like affect the time frame in which they sort of experience things and stuff. So you can kind of control for that by seeing the effects of when it was accidentally done and say that.
I do want to distinguish this from the idea of behaviorism. So we've got this idea like Pavlov's dogs, when people, you can prime people. So for example, when you treat dogs, you tell dogs that here's some food, you ring a bell, and every time you ring a bell, there's some food. You can notice that if you ring the bell, suddenly the dogs start to salivate. That's kind of similar with humans. There's a study called the white cow study. It's actually a really funny study. What it is they put a bunch of people in a room and they said, no matter what you do not think about the white cow. Okay, they show them a picture of a white cow. But if you're thinking about the white cow, if you suddenly have to think about the white cow, just ring the bell. And so they put them in this room. And after a few minutes, all of a sudden, all these bells are ringing. So people are thinking about the white cow. It's kind of the same reason why it's really difficult to go on a diet. Because if you tell yourself, for example, I can't eat pizza, then suddenly you're finding yourself only thinking about pizza, like fantasizing about pizza. And it's because you have tried to neglect or tried to deprive yourself of this particular food. And so it's really interesting. And so here we go. Let's keep going. I want to get to the part also with Braxton. So he's got a commentary on Braxton. So we're definitely going to want to listen to some of that. And then I'm actually going to go over to his chat that I just listened to yesterday with all of those people I think I decided to start at the 38-minute mark. And so we're going to listen to a little bit of that because I found that chat to be really interesting.
Well, that isn't the case in the other experiments. And the other thing, what was he comments on later on in the book is he's saying, well, it's not really clear in what sense you're free to choose when to lift your finger if you're sort of constrained by the fact that you're inside an experiment and you're acting in accordance with the rules of the experiment and so forth anyway as well. Like that's a further sort of philosophical problem that you might think about. I don't know if it's worth getting into all that stuff, but I think from like people always mention the Libet experiments without really talking about what it is and like there's issues like, because if you're using if the mechanism that you're supposedly measuring is someone's awareness and their conscious awareness of their will, but you're using that in order to report the different times as well, there's like an issue with that about what can you actually conclude about what's going on. So yeah, like it's people just know that there's this thing called the Libet experiments with something to do with free will, and they go, well, that disproves free will. But then equally badly, the apologists kind of going, well, it doesn't show that at all, and here's a bunch of like
yeah, exactly. And one of the reasons I guess we pointed out is it doesn't just prove free will. So it's actually almost an atheist trope. It's a real shame that Sam Harris picked up on it because all of a sudden all of these online atheists have jumped into this Libet experiment without actually looking into exactly what was found and all of the debunking that has been done since then in recent years. I mean, this study goes back to 1983. This study I just mentioned to you is 2017. At least we've got something relatively recent and that has looked into some of the flaws with that particular study. So please stop studying that, atheists. I'm glad that I think Nathan, it sounds like he's refuting this. He's realizing that these are very simple tasks. And so thank you, Nathan, for clarifying that.
Made up stuff that isn't true about why it doesn't show that. Like, let's actually try and talk about like what this stuff says for what it is to try and form true beliefs about the world. That's my
Absolutely. And I really don't like it when people use scientific results as hammers to push their agenda rather than as...
Okay, good. So James is also saying correct things. And I think that the idea that these two want to seek truth, I think that's wonderful because I think the truth sets you free.
a way to come progressively to understand things about the world. So the Libet experiments are interesting, but I don't think they're very definitive, which is one reason I don't spend too much time on them. But I will also add that point, I mean, that was a really good passage. I might check out that book because I think I just like the style there. But the timing of it is really essential. So you could just very readily say, yeah, we did freely choose to press one button or the other, but we didn't become consciously aware of that free choice until slightly after the free choice occurred. And I don't see any inconsistency with that. Because if you're a dualist, there's some weird interaction that's going on between the mind and the body. And so presumably everything's not going to be simultaneous anyway. So I think that's more plausible than saying it's just a trivial choice and therefore it kind of was determined. Because actually Braxton earlier gave an example of saying, I feel I have this really strong intuition that I could do this or just as easily do that, if you recall, which would seem to be an equally arbitrary trivial choice. And he actually used that as an example of free will. So I actually don't think that saying that it's trivial is a very good counter. I think a better counter is to say, yeah, we freely chose it. It's just that we became aware of freely choosing it somewhat after we actually freely chose it. Or you could even say our bodies became aware, if you preferred to phrase it that way, but whatever.
Now, one of the things that I heard on this other video that I'm going to go into in just a second is this idea of hell and heaven. And it was a big conversation about it. And he had a bunch of people on there who were atheists or agnostics or temporal agnostics, whatever they were. But a lot of people talk about God putting people in hell or God consigning people to hell. you guys just take this idea that there's this eternal torment and all that kind of stuff. There are some passages in the Bible that make it pretty clear that there is life after death. There is going to be some sort of existence after death. But you have to remember something really clear. Heaven wouldn't be heaven if God forced its inhabitants to be there. Okay, so there's either heaven or not heaven. Okay, so what is not heaven? Not heaven is an existence without God. Now, that in and of itself would be an existence of torment. You have to remember, we're all of us, no matter who you are, we all have that certain light within us. We all have the light and love of God within us. An existence without that light and love would be hellish. You don't want that existence, and that is your choice. Okay, that's your free will. You can freely choose whether or not you're going to accept the very generous offer that Jesus has given us and trust in him or not. Okay, you can accept it or not. Here we go.
So yeah, that was a really good passage. So thanks for sharing that. But I think the Libet experiments are not very definitive either way, but still quite interesting. Just a quick response to a question in the chat. If God knows what I'm going to do before I do it, does this mean I cannot choose differently to what God foreknew? I mean, there's a whole discussion about
I love that question. And so I want to address that question. So it says, again, like, let me just repeat, if God knows what I'm going to do before I do it, does this mean I cannot choose differently from what God foreknows? This is putting God into our linear timeline. Okay, God is transcendent to time. He is concurrently in the past, present, and future. So the simple fact is you can't really understand. This question makes no sense when you understand the context and what exactly God is. Now, God has given us all free will. He has not laid out, he's laid out a plan, just like a father lays out a plan for his son. I have plans for my two kids. I'd love to see them go to college. We're saving up for that. Want to make sure that they get through college. That's my plan for them. I want them to graduate college, go get an MBA, and then graduate from that, and then go buy a house or an apartment or something like that. Do some investments in real estate, maybe invest in the stock market, have a good job, be gainfully employed, get married, and have kids. That's my plan for my kids. Now, my kids can choose whether or not they want to follow my plan. And that's sort of how God has it laid out. But the distinction between me and God is, of course, God's omniscient. So he knows exactly how people are going to follow the plan or the idea that he would like them to do. Now, we all know in our hearts what God wants us to do. And sometimes if we run counter to that want, counter to what God's desire is for us, like, for example, if you are in a perfectly fine marriage and then you just decide, hey, I'm just not feeling it anymore, bye-bye, or hey, the husband or the wife has grown to such an extent that they become very sick or they're ill, or, there's something going on with them. I'm going to go ahead and divorce this person and go find a younger model, right? So that is something that definitely is counter to what God wants us to do. He doesn't want us to run around with a bunch of other people, cheating on our husbands, cheating on our wives. Those are just some examples. He also doesn't want us cheating our friends. He doesn't want us coveting our neighbor's goods. He doesn't want us bearing false witness against other people. There's this one particular atheist on Twitter who hasn't followed me lately. I've been noticing, though, every once in a while she says stuff on her channel about me, and I'm like, why are you misrepresenting what I say? And I've got a private account on Twitter, so I don't respond to her, but it's something that is of bearing false witness. And I just noticed the synagogue does somehow not have a wrench. So I'm going to go ahead and wrench the synagogue. And I'm going to... Okay, so I actually wrenched Janet and the synagogue. So I've got a couple more wrenches in the chat, and because I like having some wrenches in the chat. Yeah, the golden rule does sum it up. That's one of the things about the golden rule that Janet's bringing up, is this idea that we're supposed to do unto others as we would have them do unto ourselves. That's been found in all the major world religions. Okay, it's really interesting. It's also actually something very similar to what humanists and atheists, the American atheists, say. But I digress. Okay, so here we go.
The relationship between divine foreknowledge and freedom. And the general view is that they're not incompatible. I don't think they're incompatible. What I would say is that if God knows that you're going to do something, then you could have done differently if you had free will, but you just won't. And God knows that you won't, right? And I don't see the problem with that, because if you think God can see the future, then that's what he's seeing. The problem with creaturely counterfactuals is that it seems there's nothing for God to see. And so that's different. It's not saying what you will or won't do. It's saying what you like in the actual world, it's saying what you would or won't do in any arbitrary situation, which is a different question.
Yeah, there's so many different like ways that you can interpret this. Like, you know, what is causation? What's God's relationship to time? Stuff like.
Very good points. I just want to expand on how we know that there's some evidence of Molinism in the Old Testament when we see what Saul was doing when God said, if you go in this particular place, this will happen. And so Saul chose not to go to a particular place. We also saw in the New Testament, we saw the case with Jesus. He knew, and he pointed out at the Last Supper that there was going to be one of the apostles who was going to betray him. He knew about Judas Iscariot, and he even told Judas, "Go ahead and do what you're going to do." He foreknew that. Okay, so someone might say, "Well, Judas didn't have a choice." No, Judas did have a choice. He not only foreknew it, but he also foreknew Judas making that choice. Judas was stealing from Jesus earlier in the ministry. Remember when the woman was putting some nice perfume on Jesus and anointing him and kind of treating him in a really royal way in some ways, very expensive ointment that she put on him, perfume. Remember at that point, one of the reasons Judas was so upset about it was because he was stealing from Jesus's ministry. He was a thief. Okay. And so a lot of times if people have some sort of flaw like Judas did, that whole flaw gets magnified and carried out in other ways. And so that just, added up. And suddenly he decides to totally betray Jesus, which he, of course, regretted, ended up committing suicide by hanging himself. And then he burst. His body experienced rigor mortis and he fell to the ground headlong. That's what happens. Not a good move. You don't want to betray Jesus. Jesus is pure love, and he forgives people. Don't forget that, the enemy on the cross.
That you have to like you can like arrange different sort of permutations of these choices, and you're going to have a different answer for each one. Suffice it to say that there are like ways of God foreknowing things and you making free and contingent choices. There are also ways of arranging these possible sort of metaphysical options so as you're necessarily determined to do so, and fatalism is true or something like that. All those options are possibilities.
Yeah. So in the interest of time, I would quite like to jump forward to the review of the free will debate.
Yes, let's do that.
And because we've already been going for a while, and I would like to cover at least some of this material to dig into free will a little bit more.
Yeah, and you've got to go to sleep at some point. This is always the problem, is that it starts becoming like midnight for you. So
it's coming up to 1 a.m. I'll soldier on for a bit longer, but yes, I would like to sleep at some point.
Yeah, right, sure. Absolutely.
But Satan's encouraging me on. We have to push through. We have to counter the apologists.
Yeah. Yeah, let me go to 6:45 then, which was I think around when. I did want to like get in cheap shots of like people saying weird things and stuff.
Yeah, so it was pretty cool. And
this was my first.
You could put that in another little video if you like.
Debate. I was asked by Justin to debate the nature of human freedom.
Sorry, we should just make sure we clarify the context here. So.
One of the things that a lot of people do when they put on other people's videos is they decide to speed up their speech. And I think they've done this to Braxton. And I actually don't think that's really a good idea to do. I've done it before in the past. And the person whose speech I sped up was actually quite offended. And so I decided I better not do that anymore. I've noticed that there are some people, like there's one person, this particular person I was talking about before, who's made videos about me. And in these videos, she speeds up my speech to such an extent that you can barely recognize anything I'm saying. I do tend to speak kind of fast anyway. So speeding me up and putting me on 2 times is just not a really good move if anyone wants to be able to actually hear what I'm saying.
So Baxter and, what's his name? Dan Barker, is that right?
Yes,
yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Or is it Baker? Now I'm doubting myself.
I think it's Barker. I think so.
It's Barker?
But,
why did I think it was Baker? Anyway, so
I mean, I could be wrong.
Someone in the chat will tell us. So Braxton and Dan Barker had a debate about free will. And as I said, I don't actually think the debate is that interesting. We'll see snippets of it here. But I think this conversation after the debate is more interesting. And so we're just going to look through some of the stuff they talk about and respond to some of it and have a bit more of an opportunity to discourse about free will. Again, coming back to the worldview thing, this is a big thing for Braxton, and other apologists talk about this as well. So that's why we're kind of diving into this particular aspect in more detail. But think about this as a piece in the puzzle of the worldview comparison that we've been talking about.
Yeah, it is Barker. I just checked. That's what that noise was, by the way. I forgot to mute the audio and I opened the other video. But yeah.
tried to have debates that are more specifically targeting, well, if it's a theological issue, then there's that. But like with skeptics, I tried to focus on, does the Christian God exist or something of that sort. But when Justin Brierley says, I'd like you to debate this topic, you debate that topic.
Yeah.
And so
even if you don't know anything about it, you just make it up, right?
But fortunately, I didn't have to make too much up because I didn't make anything up because I have some familiarity with this already. And
you did have to, and you put some money in Dan's pocket because he bought his book.
I bought his book, read his book 3 times, read the Oxford Handbook on Free Will, all of it, all 670 pages or whatever it is. And
so he said right there, he read the entirety of the Oxford Handbook on Free Will, and I certainly haven't done that. I've looked at little bits of some of the articles. It looks really good. I'd like to read more of it. But he should be very well informed about current free will debates if he's read all that and internalized it. I don't deny that he read it, but I'm not convinced based on what he said that he really took much in of it.
Now, I want to mention Braxton Hunter is he's a president of a university. It's a theological university, and it's a lot of its programs, I believe, are online. And he's a really nice guy. He's been on my channel before, and I actually isolated a portion of a video that I made with him on my channel where he discussed libertarian free will in pretty good detail. He believes that if we have free will, that corresponds to God giving us that free will. He believes that there's a pretty good distinction, and he lays out that entire argument in the video that I have on my channel. I'll have to go find that and put it into the links.
As we'll see in a bit. People making fun of my accent, or I'm not quite sure. Or is that your accent? I don't know.
I think Nathan's on
You're
mute
muted
here.
Yeah, apparently I say Barker or something like. I don't know.
A bunch of journal articles and things like that. So I really feel like, the great thing about debates for me, Pritchett, I know that you just naturally learn all the time. It just comes by osmosis.
Man.
But with me, I have to try to learn. And when I have a debate coming, that pushes me forward in some areas.
Well, learn and relearn, reread things you read 5 years ago.
Yeah,
things like that.
And so that's what this debate did for me. Thank you, Seeking the Narrow Way. I greatly appreciate that. It says you just started the Genesis series and you thank us for all we do. Yeah, I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, he's got a big series. His channel's called Digital. Well, actually, first Nathan's channel is Digital Gnosis, but Braxton's channel is Trinity Radio, and he does a lot of stuff anti-atheist. Like he does a ton of atheist videos, and that's become the way that he's been known. And he gets a lot of backlash from atheists, but he also gets some positive messages. I've seen some people compliment him for converting them from atheism to Christianity, and so I a long time ago, people would say that to me. They said that I was able to, a couple of people told me that they had come to Christianity and I had helped them. I had helped them, assisted them through that process, but I haven't really heard too much on that. And I also, I don't know, I realized that my better approach is to go after the weak Christians, because that was where I was for so many years. And so I think that there are people who are honestly searching and want to know the truth. And I think that those are the people that I like to get through with the evidence that says, guess what? We have plenty of evidence for the resurrection, for example. It's really interesting. On my channel just kind of recently, I went in there and I listened to this guy called Camille Gregor, and he talked about how he would grant that Yahweh exists, and he would grant that miracles can happen. And then on this is the one I want to listen to in just a minute, but I heard this guy called Danny, and Danny said that he would grant Jesus's resurrection, but he's not saying that necessarily leads to God exists. And I'm like, what? That is what I want to get to in just a minute.
Appreciate that.
They're making me look bad. Now I got to go do my First Peter.
I wish you would. Don't you all want Pritchett to do what I'm doing with Genesis, except with First Peter? But listen,
if you haven't seen any of them, there's 4 videos. Watch 1 a
videos.
week, and then by the end of 4 weeks, I should have the next thing.
Yeah, and but I'm more proud of the Genesis. Proud in a good way. For what
I'm
God
super
has done.
proud.
There's 2
I'm
kinds of
glad
pride.
Moses
There's
wrote
good
that.
proud and pride, and there's bad pride. Pleased with how that went. And in this one, it's almost true. But there is one thing that really bugs me about this debate, about my performance, and it has nothing to do with anything technical. It has to do with the fact that I used a filler word way too much. And that word was the word feature. If you listen to this, we don't endorse drinking games or anything of the sort, but it would be a train wreck. Let me just show you what I mean. That's the principal feature there. And so that's an important feature, I think. So I think that's an important feature to keep in mind. Free will is an important feature. Okay, right there. I'm sorry, Justin, but that is a very important feature.
I'm glad you did that.
So my comment on this point was like, it's a joke, like about how I keep saying feature, but ironically, that is basically the whole argument that they give for libertarian free will, is that it's an important feature of reality. And that's like pretty much it. Oh, there we go.
Well, so let's get into, I want to actually, we're going to switch over here. I'm going to go into this other video, and that you guys are going to get a good kick out. Whoops, not this one. Okay, I'm going to get into this other video. Let me just find it really quickly here. YouTube. Okay, so I listened to this it was another video, and I listened to the end of it yesterday. I caught it while I was painting a room, and then I finished painting the room. I'm really excited about that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not going to chat all day today is because, and I never do anyway, but this, this idea of, I was listening in on that while I was painting, but today I want to do some painting as well. And I've got 3 things to grade. And so I have a little project I'm working on. So we're going to get into Nathan's channel. I like going after Nathan because Nathan listens to my channel. He comes in here sometimes. And so I think it's fun to go and see what he has to say. And so we're going to go up. I got an ad here again. Oh, and this is hilarious. So the ad on his channel right now is Candace Owens. So all these people on the right, just so funny. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to go ahead and switch the screens, get this going, share a screen, get the audio. Okay. All right, so we are going to go to the 38-minute mark on Nathan Ormond's open conversation number 12. So Nathan, picking on you today, but you're a nice guy. I think we get along pretty well when you come on my channel. All right, so here we go.
I like Eric Hernandez. I've had private conversations with him. I think he's wrong about most everything. But like, I like people that I disagree with. But the point is
okay, Nathan, I'll put it out there. I'll put a link in here if you want to come in here and chat and defend. You don't have to defend yourself. Actually, mostly it's the other people who are saying stuff that I think is so funny in here. You actually didn't say something that's terribly controversial, but some of these other people really did.
That it's not just him, right? They want to say, okay, here's an argument for the existence of God, and then they say the mind is not natural. There's a soul. And I'm just...
Now that is kind of, I've also had Eric Hernandez. That's who he's chatting about. I've had him on my channel. Eric is a Christian apologist, really nice guy. He's runs a pretty good ministry, and he makes an argument. He looks at brain and he looks versus mind. And he makes the argument that because your brain doesn't explain, like your physical brain cannot explain the metaphysical properties of your mind, therefore God exists. And I think that's a pretty good argument. Now, Eric lays it out in a much more complex, interesting way than I just did. I just really dumbed it down, but that's sort of the argument. So here we go.
It's like, okay, let me just grant it. Look, my fellow naturalist, no, I'm not a fellow naturalist, but if you're a naturalist, you can just grant it. You can grant non-naturalism. You can grant there's a soul. Why is there a God? Why, therefore, God?
Okay, so he's granting there's a soul now. So we're like, he's granting there's a soul. A little bit later, he's going to grant that Jesus' resurrection happened. Now, you guys have to think about this. I'm going to lay this all out in just a second.
I've never understood that, right? Actually, I did understand it at some point because I used to do it. But now I don't understand it, right? I kind of widen my eyes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just a non sequitur.
It's because the interaction problem is such an issue for your view that you need. No,
yeah, I don't think so, but
I'm just playing. I was trying to push your buttons.
Yeah, but
Danny, I think
you know what I'm talking. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Right? Y'all know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that makes
yeah.
Okay.
I did, yeah.
That's why I've been looking more into. I've been the whole monism and dualism. I've been looking more into like neutral monism. So I don't know. I don't even have a position. I think
what's funny is I was a physicalist.
Exactly.
I was a physicalist when I was a Christian. I thought there was a soul, but I thought the mind was physical.
Oh, I know a lot of Christians that don't even realize that they're Christian.
Yeah.
One of the things that Danny does that I was listening to is I notice he's constantly labeling himself as something. Like, I was a physicalist, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that. It's kind of an interesting thing to constantly be trying to take these positions and naming yourself as something. And I try to not do that so much, although I have said, yes, I lean to the Molinist position, but I don't say, I'm a big Molinist, I'm a Molinist. I think it's, especially because a lot of times those positions are imitating somebody else's ideas. So this is going after somebody, I think it's Molina. And if you say, like, I'm a Thomist, you're going after Thomas Aquinas or that sort of thing. And so I try to avoid that to some extent.
They actually are a physicalist. They just don't. Well, I thought it was funny, actually, now that you bring that up. I was listening in on one of Praise's channels, and they were talking about, they were having kind of a Trinitarian, Unitarian. This kind of goes along the lines of dualism, right? And I just wanted to bring this up because I know Praise is a subjective idealist, but he was actually talking about the physical traits of Jesus being the things that set him apart from God the Father. And I'm like, as a subjective idealist, how are you going to the natural? Why are you
like the idea that if you identify.
Well, so the idea with Jesus is the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. Very fascinating statement that draws our attention to the Logos and also draws our attention to the very first words in Genesis. Okay. And also draws our attention to us being made in God's image. Now, a lot of times people try to say that God is this brain, this bodiless. In fact, that's what they said in here. He's some sort of bodiless brain, disembodied brain, that sort of thing. But because God doesn't have a physical earthly body, doesn't mean that we're not made in God's image. What does that mean to be made in God's image? God has to look like us to some extent. Okay. So there is a different type of resurrection body that Jesus had, slightly different than what his earthly body looks like. There's a resurrection body. I would assume that God has something very similar to that. And that's how he can say we were made in his image. His image is not a disembodied brain, like you would picture this brain sitting around in a vat. That's not the case.
Identify God as Jesus is like physical, because presumably on Christianity, Jesus is a mind, right? That's like the sufficient condition there. And
Well, to some, yeah.
One of those things is the idea of parts and a mind. Actually, it speaks to kind of a really interesting, fascinating thought. Think about how we're not a sum of parts. Like, for example, if you cut off my arms and my legs, I know that sounds terrible, but if you cut off my arms and my legs, I'm still a person. I'm still, I'm no less of a person than somebody who has arms and legs. Okay. I'm still a person because I still have my mind. I still have consciousness. Now, if I'm in a coma, I'm still a person. Okay. Even though my mind isn't working at that point, I'm still considered a person. If my heart's still beating, I'm still alive in some way. Okay. Still a person. If I'm in the womb, no matter what the age, okay, if I've been conceived in the womb, I'm still a person. Okay. So if you decide that you're going to take the life of an unborn baby in the womb, you're taking the life of another person. You're taking the life of a person with full potential. Okay. So you have to, that's upon you. That's something that is something that I believe we're entitled to in the world under the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. And we're entitled to that in the United States under the Declaration of Independence and the 14th Amendment. We're entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So if you take a baby's life, who's in the unborn, an unborn baby, you have to relabel that as a flesh or a tissue or something that's non-person. But when do you pretend that personhood is conferred? Do you pretend personhood is conferred magically in the birth canal? Or at some point when the baby would be viable outside the womb? No, the baby is a person just as much at zero, at the point of conception as 9 days later or 20 days later or 3 months later, still a person.
Yeah, because they think he existed prior to creation, right? So he didn't have a body. There was Jesus, but no body.
Well,
right?
See, so he's one of the things that Jesus did exist prior to creation, because even in the book of Genesis, it talks about in the beginning, let us make man in our image. Okay, so who is God speaking to? Now, Michael Heiser makes a pretty good argument that God's speaking about his entire divine counsel. And then it says that God, he alone was the one who made the earth and did that kind of stuff. But you could also make an argument that he's speaking, as most Christians actually make the argument, that he's referring to himself as part of this Trinity and also referring to Jesus. Jesus was around from the very beginning. And so what kind of form did Jesus have? Well, I would assume that Jesus had a form very similar to what his resurrection form was. Not this disembodied mind that seems to be what Danny's putting out, but let's go.
You can just make anything up, but if you're committed to Orthodox theology, you're going to have a hard time with that whole, homoousia, parousia, whatever.
Yeah, if I ever went back to Christianity, I would be the biggest heretic
What
ever.
is that?
I would have to be. I would be like
the hypostatic union. Is that what they call that? The hypostatic, whatever the hell that. Like, I heard the first time I heard that, I had to have my brother explain to me. I was like, "What kind of theological mumbo jumbo is that?"
Well, I think you have to make sense of the word essence or nature to make sense of that view, and I can't make sense of nature or essence. I think that's too. It's too. It seems like it has to do with necessity, but it's not like logical necessity. So I don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Have you heard about Camille's game show idea?
No.
What's
his game show idea?
So you have a whole panel full of theologians, and then you have like random Christians come in, and their job is just like try to talk about the Trinity without committing like one of the heretics, and see like the one who can last the longest wins.
The final.
Now, these guys actually are kind of the quintessential atheists, because if you go into the Pew Research polls and you go into different places like that and you look at what does the typical atheist look like, These guys, these guys, exactly. Young men, a lot of times young men who are, for various reasons have decided to pursue atheism. And so they listen to people like Pine Creek. Pine Creek is an older man who shows up later on this channel and poses some pretty interesting questions about, actually, those were really good questions I heard yesterday at the end of the thing. I might even zoom ahead to that for a second.
The final round is where they have the anti-theists come in and they say, "Please don't spit on the contestants."
Not funny.
Don't spit on the panel, please.
You talking about Camille Gregor?
I am not familiar with Myth Vision. I've never seen this guy or heard of this guy, and so I'm curious. I realized that I think he said something earlier here that he's not a Jesus mythicist. He realizes that there's a historical Jesus, but he is he enjoys talking to people who pretend that Josephus and Paul were myths. If we only had the book of Paul, if we only had Paul's books, if we only had one book of Paul, 1 Corinthians, we have enough. Okay, that's enough. We actually wouldn't even need the other Gospels. We wouldn't need anything that Peter wrote, anything like that, anything that James or Jude wrote. Now, remember, James and Jude are Jesus' half-brothers who believe that Jesus is the Christ. Though they tried to stop his ministry, they believe that Jesus is the Christ. Okay, Paul, who was Saul, chasing down and battering Christians, arresting them, throwing them into prison. He said in 1 Corinthians 15 that Jesus appeared first to Peter, then to the 12, then to 500, then to James, Jesus' brother, and then to Paul. Okay, if we only had Paul and those attestations, it's from very early, within 5-year Christian creed, that's enough. Sorry, game's over. Even if we only had, we didn't even have that. If all we had were the 9, or even a couple of the 9, like Josephus's writings. If we only had Josephus, we have enough attestation to Christianity. Josephus said that the apostles believed that they saw the risen Christ. Even if we didn't have any of that, even if we didn't have Josephus or the Bible, we'd have Tacitus. Tacitus gives us a lot of insight on the early Christians. Celsus, Suetonius, Marabar Serapion. These are all hostile people in ancient times during the time of Christianity, during the time that Christianity had just begun, who attest to Jesus. Clement of Rome, born in the year 35. He gives us enough testimony. Even if we had none of the Gospels, pretend that the entire Bible had somehow gotten destroyed, like no copies are left. But guess what? The early church fathers, Eusebius and Irenaeus and a whole bunch of other ones, Polycarp, Justin Martyr, they wrote enough that they paraphrased the Bible enough that even if we only had their copies or their gospel quotes, they had quoted stuff, we'd have enough. We have such an abundance of evidence in support of Jesus that it's actually downright silly to not believe. Now, what's interesting is Danny's going to grant the resurrection here. So let's hear this.
Yeah.
Dude,
He was in his latest.
He's a funny guy. He's funny.
Yeah, I hope. Like, I have this, I have a really hard time looking at much of apologists because, and anytime they're like at the least bit sassy, I get really annoyed. But I can handle if Nathan gets sassy because he's sort of on my side, in a sense. And I wonder, could
see how tribal this is?
I think Camille Gregor is great. Could I stand watching him if I was a theist? I don't know.
Yeah. It's weird, man.
Yeah, I can stand watching Camille because I find Camille actually rather amusing. I don't know what it is about Camille, but I feel like there's this underlying current of snark where I think he says stuff and it's like he doesn't sometimes even seem like he believes what he's saying. And I think that's really hilarious. Now, here we go.
Is a light switch goes off. For me, I used to watch the William Lane Craig.
Oh no, we summoned him.
Oh no, he's back from the dead. No. I used to watch William Lane Craig when I was just basic fundamentalist Christian going into this. I thought I was right to start, and you're just biased. And I'd watch these debates and sometimes I'd listen to the opponent, but sometimes I would fast forward through Richard Dawkins
Yeah, I don't blame him for fast forwarding through Richard Dawkins. Yes, Nathan wants a link. So let me just go ahead. Nathan, I'm going to go ahead and get a link here and I'm going to post it on your DM and Twitter. So swoop on over to Twitter and I'm going to put you into a link and I could open it up for some other people if you want. I don't want to make it totally open house here, but all right. Nathan Digital. Okay, let me just see. I got the link. Hold on. Trying to get, there we go. Oh, looks like I've never sent him a DM in this account. All right, Nathan, you got a link. So I'm going to come over here and just be monitoring this to see if you come in. All right, so here we go. Bad. Wait, hold on. Let me come back to StreamYard for just a second, see if Nathan pops in. Okay, so Nathan said he could join. All right, so I'm just waiting here. I'm going to go back to the stream, and I'm going to come back and monitor this. So let me just, whoops, wait, I want to do that. Oh, there he is. Okay. Hi, Nathan.
Hey, SJ, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
So I've been enjoying watching your channel. It's pretty funny, actually. It's open conversation. I liked the questions. Believe it or not, I liked the questions that Doug was asking. So yesterday, I thought that was funny. So name the apologists that you think are going to convert to Christianity, or the atheists you think are going to convert to atheism. I thought that was really funny. And did you see that I put you in the chat?
Put me in the chat where? Sorry. Oh, when
he said, because I named Pine Creek and you just as kind of a joke on Pine Creek, but because I don't think Pine Creek.
Oh, I wouldn't have seen it. No.
Oh yeah, I was there for like a brief second while I was painting, and I thought, haha.
Yeah, I mean, he did ask that question, didn't he? He said, who is the most likely out of 4 people to convert to Christianity? And they all agreed it was me. So.
Yeah, well, you're young. I think that's part of it. You're pretty young, and there's a lot of years ahead. I mean, I look at Danny too. Danny's pretty young. And who's this other guy that was in here? Who's Myth Vision and this other guy? I can't see his name on here, but
yeah, Myth Vision's got a channel that like about a year and a half ago was pretty much exclusively dedicated to like Jesus mythicism stuff. But now he's just sort of interviewing everyone on everything to do with religion and the Gospels and Mormonism and stuff like that. A lot of biblical scholars, and he also interviewed. There's a guy in Australia who claims to be Jesus, and he had like an interview with him. So that's pretty interesting and fun as well.
Oh my gosh, a guy in Australia. That's kind of silly. Our beliefs are he's supposed to come in glory to judge the living and the dead. He's not going to come as some random guy sitting in Australia. So.
Well, I think the point of view from the other side of the kind of worldview discussions is like, well, you can see how people are actually convinced that this guy is Jesus, is actually Jesus, and they get convinced of a whole bunch of like metaphysical claims and things based off of what this guy has to say about like reincarnation and so forth. And you can see all of those features of human psychology at work and go, yeah, it's probably actually something very similar going on in the early church. From the other side of the worldview discussion, obviously it doesn't make sense from a Christian point of view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So actually, I already kind of mentioned what was the interesting part of your thing. Maybe I'll stop sharing this and just come back here and see, so I can see the chat. And yeah, so I agree. I agree that there's I wanted to ask you, do you grant, like, one of the things, here's what I heard in your chat that I want to sum up just a few items. Okay, I heard that Danny is willing to grant the resurrection, but he says that doesn't necessarily prove that God exists. What do you think about that argument?
I mean, I think he's actually right. Like, you have to have some further thing that connects it to demonstrate that it's God that did that, or it has to be God that did that and not something else. Just Jesus resurrecting on his own wouldn't. I think personally for me, if I'd experienced it, it would convince me. But I don't think that it sort of logically follows in the same way that like a mathematical proof would, or like a scientific experiment or something. There isn't that actual connection there. It would mostly be, I think, emotional from my point of view at that point. So
if Jesus did that, now I know, here's one of the things. He was claiming to be the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One. He was claiming all of this stuff. So by doing that, he's vindicating himself in his claims. Is that reasonable to say? Now you're saying, okay, if right now we've got some guy who somehow dies in 3 days, shows up, but never claimed to be God, then there's no justification for saying, oh, he must be God. But is that what you're saying?
You'd have to show, I suppose, how, that his claims were actually true and he wasn't just resurrected for some other means. I mean, like, maybe it's easier to take it off of the resurrection and talk about something else. Like I've often talked about, like, if we came across, like a smashed window going into a room, we're just walking along the street and we see like a broken window, and there's like a TV stand and the TV's missing, and we're going to go, oh, I wonder what happened here. Like this is pretty interesting. And like one of us might say, well, I think that there's one person came along, threw a brick through the window, so that smashed the glass, and then they ran off, and then another person came. They went into the house, so they've broken a law, but then they decided to go off because they got bored, and then a third person came along and stole the TV. Now that explains all of the data that we've got. That would account for it. That's sufficient to bring about the phenomena that we see. Mm-hmm. But that's not the only explanation that's there. I mean, it also could have been, like a UFO alien, like a UFO landed and aliens got out, and they, the sonic boom from their engines or something is what shattered the window. And then one of them just decided to put a brick that, like, there's all sorts of explanations that could be possible. And I guess you'd have to show why, I think it would have to be like an inference to the best explanation why God raising Jesus from the dead, because he's the Logos or something, was the best one for the data. Because it could just be, like it could be that the universe was created by like pixies who are just mischievous, and they decided that they're going to do this for fun to mess with humanity, for example, or something like that.
Yeah, well, I've heard that kind of argument coming from people like Neil deGrasse Tyson. Now, Neil deGrasse Tyson thinks there could be a malicious sort of force that's behind the universe that's sort of just making fun of us. And so it's just people being willing to accept the fact that it looks like we're a part of creation. There is a creation, and that it looks like it was all divinely oriented and divinely designed and mathematically put together, and saying, well, then who is the source? Well, is it pixies, or is it God, or is it benevolent God, or is it a non-benevolent God? So it's just coming to grasp with what information. I want to say hi to Veckel too.
Hey, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Yeah,
okay.
I think
I'm in a coffee shop, so there might be some loud background noise.
Oh, no worries. No worries. Thanks for coming on. I haven't talked to you in a long time, Veckel.
Yeah, it has been a while. Go ahead, Nate. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I was just going to say, like, I think, so someone who, say, was like convinced of the Kalam, for example, might say, okay, well, again, that's equally like indeterminate about what that cause was. So I'm going to say, it's these timeless, spaceless, immaterial pixies with sufficient creational powers to create the universe. And then they might even have something extra going for them, right? Because we see a lot of gratuitous evils in the world. We see a lot of seemingly meaningless suffering. And so the pixies being mischievous, it seems to me at least that they'd be more likely to create a world that's that way than an omnibenevolent God, for example. So then when they say, well, also the pixies resurrected Jesus to mess with humanity, if we think, I'm not saying that this is what I actually think is the case, but if you wanted to parody the Christians' reasoning in that way, you could. But again, I don't think that that's going to convince anyone who is a Christian, because I don't know. It just seems like it's ridiculing them. I'm going to have to go for 1 second though, SJ, and then I'll be back. Sorry about this.
Oh, no worries. So Veckel, did you happen to see my response to Nathan on his channel, their thing on the resurrection?
No, I missed a portion of it. Because you talking about today, right?
No, not today. I was talking about, I made it when did I make it? Was it yesterday or the day before? What I did was I think I made it a couple days ago, and it had Nathan and Apologia and a couple of other atheists. And it's so funny how they devote like an enormous amount of time discussing God and the resurrection and Jesus and Christianity. I mean, this is like a full-time job for Nathan. He goes over 8-hour streams on this stuff.
Yeah. It's always fascinated me about the amount of time atheists spend talking about a being that doesn't exist and stuff, And I've often said that it's one thing if Christianity, there was anything in the tenets of Christianity that suggests that we kill non-believers, or, we deliberately go into non-believers' homes or their establishments and try to stop them from doing whatever it is that they're doing because it doesn't line up with our beliefs. But that's not the case at all with Christ. It's not the case at all with any of the teachings in the New Testament. The teachings that we see in the New Testament is that we're supposed to glorify God and do unto others as we have them done unto us, to love our fellow man, to love those who persecute us, and bless those who curse us. You don't see anything being taught by Christ that is similar to anything in the Quran, you know. But yet we have these atheists who are out, it would make sense if that were the case. If you did actually see any,
like if we were
aspects
in
of the
Islam.
Christian tenets. Yeah, exactly.
In a lot of places, that you could be killed for being an atheist in a lot of places.
Right, but Christianity is teaching the opposite of what you see written in some parts of the Quran. So when an atheist is wasting all their time talking about, spending all their time every Sunday doing a Bible study in order to refute the existence of God, it seems utterly futile from my view.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I think that these are really strong arguments. I mean, if you look at the first, now I'm noticing people in the chat. Here's the thing. Vekla and I are not claiming that Christians have always been good people. And in fact, we're saying that no Christians are particularly good people. I mean, a lot of Christians we all fall short, right? So
That's
during
right.
our history,
John chapter 1, verses 8 through 10. Yeah.
Yeah. So during our history, we can say, though, that in the first few hundred years, Christians didn't have any power for 280 years until 313, when Christianity was legalized by Constantine. We didn't have power, and a lot of Christians back then were being persecuted pretty sporadically, but definitely, being beheaded and stoned and killed and all this kind of stuff. And we saw evidence of that from outsiders like Tacitus and others who documented that. And so we had Christian and Pliny the Younger. Christians were harshly persecuted. And then what happened? So we were in a really bad position. We weren't land grabbers or doing anything like that. Then we did have the Crusades, and we had, we have a history of the church doing some pretty silly things, like this idea that you can pay for the ability to sin and indulgences, which was totally ridiculous. And we had reformers like Martin Luther, but Martin Luther wasn't perfect at all. He had some bad views. And then you had slavery and some people making justifications of the slaves through certain Bible passages, which is absurd. And so, and actually they made their own Bible up to remove the passages that would go against their beliefs. And then remember the Christian abolitionists who stopped all this stuff.
Yeah, that's right. So whenever I see an atheist spend their time talking about Christianity, talking about Christ, talking about God, it still fascinates me that we have these people spending all this time when it could be doing something else, talking about something that they claim doesn't exist. So it just fascinates me.
Yeah, and I think that might be a distinction between the YouTube atheists and the Twitter atheists and that kind of atheist versus some of the ones we might meet in real life. Because I think in real life, at least I had my husband's had an uncle who passed away a while back, but he apparently was an atheist, and I really doubt he spent really much of any time talking about that.
Exactly.
So there are definitely some. Yeah. There are definitely some.
Yeah,
and Nathan's
you're
one.
You're right about that. Yeah.
Yeah, Nathan's one. Well, we won't talk behind his back because he had to get off here, but he's an interesting case because he was Christian and then he decided not to be Christian, and now he's kind of like a Pine Cone advocate or Pine Creek advocate.
Right. I got you. Right.
Have you listened to any of his open streams or anything like that?
No, I keep forgetting to go check him out. So when he gets back in here, I could get a link to his channel. Check him out someday.
Yeah, he actually has built up. He's got almost 2,000 followers now on his channel, and he's been building it up by making these gigantic open streams where he'll go for like 8 hours. Like it's a work day.
Right. Oh yeah. But lately, I've been kind of. Well, I don't want to change the topic. So.
No. What have you been working on lately?
Well, it started off with a conversation I had with somebody last week, and we were talking about, free will versus predestination. And the more I listened to this guy talk, the more I began to realize that he was an open theist. But I didn't know that for sure until I started asking him some direct questions. And sure enough, it turns out that that's what he is. And I've always heard of open theism before. I just never really had the passion to really do any research on it or to look thoroughly into it to see what it is that they believe until recently, until just a couple of days ago. And now I feel like that's when that's what God is doing to me right now. I have this burning desire to study up more on this thing called open theism. But at the same time, the more I look into it, the more disgusted I become. I listened to a debate between Matt Slick and a guy named William Duffy. And I was literally, this is no euphemism, no metaphor, nothing like that. I literally became sick to my stomach listening to this debate. Well, listening to William Duffy, because this guy was asserting that God can sin, that God can be surprised, that God can make mistakes, that there are some things that God doesn't know. I mean, it was absolutely one of the most disgusting things I've ever heard in my life. And that actually grown in an even bigger hatred towards that than atheism, to be honest. Because at least atheists, when they're speaking about God, they're speaking about it in pure ignorance and maybe some outright rejection of what they believe is in the Bible, even though they don't know anything about the scripture. But we have people who profess to be Christians, evangelists, ministers, and they're going around telling people these insane things about God. And that just boils my blood to no end. So
yeah, I'm looking at I keep hearing about open theism lately. And so I just figured it says, in short, open theism says that since God and humans are free, God's knowledge is dynamic and God's providence flexible. While several versions of traditional theism picture God's knowledge of the future as singular fixed trajectory, open theism sees at its plurality of branching possibilities. I totally reject that. So
yeah.
And I reject that because the Bible rejects that. The Bible says that God is unchanging.
Exactly. Yeah, they literally take literally. They like to disregard figure of speech, anthropomorphisms, any of those types of things. They just totally disregarded and said, no, that the Bible doesn't do that. We take the Bible literally. We take it at face value. Blah 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 blah. That's how they escape some of these from giving an answer to some of these questions that we'll raise towards them. Like, for example, why would God ask Adam a question? And they literally believe that it's because that was something that God himself didn't know about. So that's why he asked Adam, where are you? And who told you that you were naked? Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the ways that God was interacting with him. He knows what he's going to answer, but he's also doing it for, a lot of this is recording interactions between those two for the rest of us, for our benefit.
Right. It's like it's a rhetorical question. It's like if my daughter eats a cookie out of the cookie jar after I told her not to go into the cookie jar, I come back and see that there's a cookie missing, and I see crumbs all over her face. I'm going to bring conviction to her by saying, "Did you eat a cookie out of the cookie jar?" Even though I know that she did. And then she says, "No, I didn't." And then I'll ask her another rhetorical question. Are you lying to me? Even though I know she is lying, but I'm asking a rhetorical question. Why? To bring conviction to her. That's why. Not because I didn't know anything or know a certain thing.
That you just reminded me, that's actually a really good comparison, because I just remember when my oldest son was 1.5 and my youngest son had just been born. My oldest son wanted to get a cookie, and there were cookies on the counter that I had just baked, and and I told him he had to wait till after he ate lunch he could have a cookie. And so he goes up to me and he goes, "Baby poo poo," and I'm like, "What do you mean? Oh, I have to go change the baby's diapers?" He's like, yes, baby poo poo." And I was like, "Okay, I'll play along." So then I go around to the other room and I watch through the kitchen thing and I see what he's doing, and he goes in there and grabs a cookie. Kids at 1.5 years scamming me.
Oh man. See, you didn't even have to teach him how to say it. See?
Well, that's when he got a little bit older, and I got him on film when he's like 4 years old, and I'm like, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And he goes, banker, and I'm like, "Oh, you want to be a banker?" "Yeah, I want to be a banker." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "Because that's where everybody puts their money."
That's funny. That's funny.
He's crazy. So I don't know. Now he says he wants to be a realtor. We'll see what happens.
Oh man, wow, that's good.
Yeah.
But
See
yeah,
how
that's where I've been pulled to lately. So I'm doing more research. I want to get a book that a lot of people have been referring to me by a guy named John Frame. I'm sure you've heard of him.
No,
And
I
he has a
haven't.
book. Oh, okay, yeah.
Is he big in open
I'm kind of
theism?
into. No, he's the debunking. He has a book against open theism, I guess. So.
No, that's good. So
Yeah.
I think I compare that to like progressive Christianity or any of these other faiths that are crafting their own faith, or universalism, saying that everyone's going to be universally reconciled, all that kind of stuff. Nathan's back.
Right.
Just had to go. Sorry, guys.
Oh, no worries. So, we were just, Beck was just talking about kind of going back to our original part of this conversation, or your original thing on free will and stuff like that, is Beck was talking about these people who call themselves open theists, and this idea that they put God into a non-omnipotent, non-omniscient place. And so I think that that's not consistent with the Bible, but it's interesting how these little branches of heretics come out.
I think that's more consistent with the Bible myself.
That he says he's unchanging? Because God does make it really clear in that he's unchanging.
Well, it depends. There's a lot of questions, right, about how we're going to like do our systematic theology. But I think it's definitely more consistent with Old Testament theology.
Well, that's where he says he's unchanging, actually. That's where I got to get the verse. Hold on.
It depends on how you're reading these things, though, because there's verses either way, right? Because, like I could do the same thing and just go, yeah, but then God says he repents here. And then you could tell me like an ad hoc story about what but in general, like, it seems to me that, like I think you'd both want to be committed to the idea of like progressive revelation, especially when it comes to morality and stuff. And I think you can see over time these people working out like a conception of God, and the later kind of Hellenization and later kind of philosophical ideas seem to change things, and this monotheism seems to emerge out of being oppressed and stuff, and basically pushing God into this divine realm. Like he'll eventually come and save us, but it's not like that. Those other gods, which are just kind of like statues and poles and things, as you see monotheism being developed. But
yeah, let me first get to, because let me just name some verses. So we've got Hebrews 13:8. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Malachi 3:6. For I, the Lord, do not change. James 1:17, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Numbers 23:19, God is not man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should change his mind. So, I mean, that's just going to a few of them. You could find a whole bunch. I'm just saying that I think what you're referring to.
But the problem with... Okay, yeah, sure.
Wait, I think what you're referring to is coming from like Michael. Have you read Michael Heiser's work at all?
I've not read any of his stuff, but I've watched a fair few of his lectures, especially like Rob's quite into him.
Oh yeah. I forgot you guys are good friends, you and Rob. And so I think because I was just listening to, besides listening to your stream yesterday while I was painting this room, I was listening to the room I'm actually in, and I'm smelling the paint now. So excuse me if I start getting crazy, but I was listening to Michael Heiser. He does a really good stuff on unseen realm and Psalm 82, and this idea that God is the most high, but there's all these other spiritual beings in the world. And people like Pine Creek got on. Actually, I saw that Pine Creek commented on this particular channel. I think it was Capturing Christianity's channel. And Pine Creek said something like, does that mean that you're polytheist because you believe that there are these other gods? And Heiser made a pretty good distinction. He said, even though it says gods in the Bible, we have a connection with that word. But it really, in different translations, it could say spiritual beings or that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not so much in response to what Heiser's saying there, but I think in response to the idea of doing theology by just sort of like ripping propositions out of the Bible and saying like that's a fact, like however that sounds to you. I think there's an issue with that because if you want to take that point of view, then there's straight up contradictions all over the place. Now, I'm not saying that there have to be contradictions on a Christian worldview, but if you're committed to doing theology that way, then there have to be contradictions. You know, is God a man so that he can change his mind? Well, then what the hell's God doing changing his mind when Moses is praying to him over how many people to be, you know, how many people should be just in the city to be saved before he's gonna burn it down? Like there's so many of those issues if that's your approach to reading the Bible. So I think not that I don't know, maybe that's what you need. Maybe you need to have like a polarized worldview that's against the world and other in order to stay a Christian. So maybe I'm not the right person, but I would think, yeah.
Veckel has a pretty good answer for that, because Veckel was talking about the idea that sometimes God, it's for us to understand God and to understand how he is, because he says in the Bible, it says somewhere that he's beyond our understanding. We really can't grasp him. But a lot of times you see these interactions between God and humans, and it looks like God's, okay, right now I'm going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. I think that's the reference that you're referring to.
Yeah.
And Moses is saying, well, what if there's 50 good people? Well, if there are 50 good people, then I won't destroy. Then Moses is like, well, what if there's 40 good people left? Well, okay, if there's 40 good people, then I won't destroy. What if there's, he gets all the way down to like 10. and so I think it's the idea that it's kind of a learning lesson and a message for us that sometimes we just see that God is you can come, let us reason together. Remember that?
But I suppose, like why say, because this is going beyond the text with the methodology of the systematic theology we bring to it. Why say that that's the one that's wrong, rather than saying that's right, God does change his mind. But when it says, is God a man that he should change his mind? That's actually just kind of like a nice bit of metaphor that's teaching us a lesson. I think in making that decision, that's just the completely like arbitrary reasons, really. And so I'd say reject the meta principle of just ripping sentences out of the Bible and saying like these are facts, and engage with it in a more nuanced way, in terms of painting a picture of God. But that's very difficult to do because Christianity is also an ecclesial community, which comes with a systematic theology and a set of dogmas that you have to adhere to and stuff like that. So it's very difficult to do that in an honest way while being part of a community that has to adhere to a certain model of God, even if you're not getting that from reading the Bible.
Yeah, let me just say, and I agree with Jamie Russell here. Literary device, anthropomorphic relation, etc. These are, I'm sure you know the arguments against those kind of things. So like if you're a Christian, you're going to say these are the arguments against that. This is what typical Christian. So I want to say hi to CJ. So CJ, welcome.
Yeah, shalom. How's it going?
Pretty good. So right now Nathan is surrounded by 3 Christians.
Maybe I'll be converted. Well, did you see my prayer experiment, SJ?
And I heard about it. I heard because I think I was flipping on your channel to find which video to review, and I think I saw it. So what happened with that?
Well, I get a few comments from Christians saying, why are you thinking about God and talking about God and stuff? You just need to pray and repent or whatever. And so I thought I'd do 4 months of just praying to God as frequently as I sort of could and see what the results were. And I am yet to be converted, though. Christians can just say, well, it doesn't have to be now, does it? Which is fair enough. But
I think that's, I have to tell you my own story. I kind of was one of the reasons why I'm so vocal as I am is because I spent about 20 years praying to God and asking for an answer and thinking that Eastern faiths were somewhat superior to ours, and kind of falling for people like Wayne Dyer and a lot of his progressive Christian ideas, and thinking about universalism being true. We're all universally reconciled no matter what we believe in. And I had those kind of beliefs for a long time, and I kept praying and praying for an answer. And it's like, God didn't answer me until I was about 40 something. So it took him a long, because I wasn't on, he's not on my timeline. I'm on his, and he knew my heart wasn't ready for it. And so.
Yeah, well, I like that could be right. But at this moment in time, I definitely don't have the sort of beliefs that would indicate that for me, I guess. And
would you want it to be true? Let me ask you this: Would you want Christianity to be true, or do you not want it to be true? What would be the better picture for you?
I think it depends on the kind of Christianity, because even though a lot of people are Christians and you use that word, a lot of people mean very different things by it.
That's true.
A lot of a lot of the Christian pictures of the world, I do think, are better, or better from like a sort of like what I'd like to be true about reality perspective than like a naturalism or something. Like the idea that God would become, like the idea that, okay, we find ourselves in this world with all this kind of suffering and something's gone wrong and stuff, and then the idea that there's this grand story about sin, but God himself wants to set it right, but the way he does that is by participating in it as well. Like that, it's such a meaningful and beautiful and rich story, that if reality were that way, I think it would be a really wonderful thing. I guess the problem for me is that I don't think it's true, and I think when you start questioning all of that, there's a lot of problems that get drawn out of it. But I don't know, like maybe I could be like a fideist or something, or yeah. Sorry.
Let me just say, because I know we've got different views in the chat. So we've got like Veckel is, I think he's a Calvinist. I know Synagogue is more of, he's a more literal believer in the Bible. I'd put myself in the Baptist camp. So we've got three different perspectives, but then there's also like and I don't know, Veckel could be Baptist Calvinist, I don't know, but I'm more of a Molinist, I guess I would say. I think that London Theist, have you ever seen London Theist or interacted with him?
Yeah, I've interacted with him. I spoke to him on here for like 5 minutes once, I think.
Because he's I think if I remember right, he's more of an Orthodox Christian, and I could kind of see you maybe if you did come to Christianity going through that door, going through the Orthodox door.
Yeah, it would depend. I think some of the things that I find really difficult are, so like I find the liturgy and stuff really beautiful, but then the issue is that when you go in those circles and you start talking to some of the people who are in them, and I find it very difficult to take people seriously when they like believe in like a young earth, or they believe that it's wrong for people to be gay and stuff like that. Like that, all these things, I'm just not going to take your worldview seriously as a whole if there's all these problems with background beliefs that I don't think can be justified. Now they're going to say it is justified for these reasons, and then I'm just going to say, well, it's not. Here's a different set of background beliefs that I work from. I think the culture right now has got a lot of people picking on Christians for their views on or what the Bible says about gay people. I think that's what's going on right now, and it's nothing that we can do to. I mean, we can't just go change and say, okay, the book of Romans, let's just pull it out of the Bible, or let's go ahead and pull Leviticus out of the Bible. We can't do that. So it's part of our belief system, and I think God structured the world so a man, a woman procreate and have kids. I think that's a way that the world can continue. You can't continue a world if all of a sudden everyone say right now we have 5% of the people in the world are gay. Suddenly we become 95% of the world is gay. How is the world possibly going to continue? And so that's all I'm saying. Well, there's a few things in there, aren't there? I mean, firstly, it's just not true to say of Christianity that it hasn't evolved over time, especially if you're a Protestant. You've got extra no foundation for that claim. But then to believe in the New Testament, to have books in the New Testament that were written later than much later than just the Gospels, after some kind of some struggles around orthodoxy, to believe in the New Testament at all on top of the entire Old Testament, to believe in the monotheistic conception of God, which is clearly a progression of the themes that are in the Pentateuch. Like Christianity, if it's anything, is this progressive sort of collective of people who are grappling with this idea of God and these ultimate questions of life and figuring it out as a community. And that clearly has changed throughout time. So I think to say no, like in 1970s Southern America, they got it right with their particular dogmas and things is just very, very short-sighted.
Well, I think, if I may, though, I think I have to challenge that, because I know that's a claim a lot of people will make. But I got my nose in Torah basically every single day, and that's just not true. Like the Torah is exceptionally clear that it is monotheistic, that God is one God, right? That, I mean, like there's just and not to be rude, but there is a reason why nobody but 19th and 20th century philosophers trying to refute this have come to this conclusion. Like there is a reason why we have thousands upon thousands of years of everybody reaching the exact same reaching the exact same conclusion on this. It's because it is clear. And when we start having points like people will say, oh, well, What about when he says the first commandment, right? The way he words it, have no other gods before me. That doesn't explicitly deny that
I wouldn't
there's
say
other gods.
that.
Like, okay, but it doesn't imply that there is other gods either. It's just simply saying the object of ultimate worship is to be Jehovah. That's the point.
Well, they can make out their own gods, like money is a god. You know what I'm saying? When you say no gods.
And so the point is, it's not that Zeus or Ammon or whatever exists. It's that you are not to have any objects of worship which are greater than Jehovah your God, right? Which at that point, that could be like Esther just pointed out, that could be money. That could be, it could be rocks, for crying out loud, right? But there is, that statement in and of itself is monotheistic, right? I am the Lord your God.
I didn't make the claim that you're arguing with, by the way. You're fighting a shadow right now.
Well, you did explicitly say that the beginning was henotheistic, which isn't true.
No. So some Christians are henotheistic. I actually think that a lot of the authors in the Bible were completely polytheistic. The kind of claims I'm working off are these ideas of like Yahweh battling Rahab, for example, a sea monster, and creating creation out of them. I don't think that squares away with like a Hellenistic conception of a triomni God.
Let me just interrupt really quickly to say hi to, because we got two more people in here. So Danny, who's I believe a non-believer, if I'm not correct, unless he changed his mind since I listened to it.
Thanks to LPP, I'm an atheist.
I was about to say something, Danny. Like we
got LPP too.
You used to think you were an agnostic. Well, he used to be an agnostic. And,
but LPP is abusive towards agnostics.
I know. I've been beating him up so much that he finally became an atheist. Yeah.
Oh, so it's good to have the two of you together.
No, actually, that's ironic. Danny and I actually get along really well.
Yeah, we get along.
Oh, that's good. So now LPP is another Christian, and he does a lot of debate. Actually, a lot of you guys. I've been seeing you guys on all these channels. So welcome everybody. It's great.
Nathan, are you the one that Converse reached out to me about, who's wanted to do a debate against Sal and myself?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So you honestly think that a good number of the Old Testament authors were polytheistic?
It depends what time period you're talking to. I think the second half of Isaiah is where you start seeing a radical monotheism emerging.
Well, hang on though, because you just brought up the Rahab thing. That's in the second half of Isaiah. It's actually considered by scoffing scholars to be pseudo Isaiah, which I would of course disagree with, or Deutero Isaiah, whatever you want to call it. So if that's what you consider to be like the most monotheistic, then wouldn't that indicate, like I would argue, that the Rahab thing is poetry, which, by the way, I think it very clearly is, right? Where it says, art thou not which had dried the seas in the same place? Well, the seas are clearly not dry, right? This is
I think you're doing the same thing as before, where you're sort of fighting a shadow again. So you're telling me a bunch of things that you think I think, which I haven't said, which you're arguing.
Hey, Nathan, CJ, hang on one second, man, before you respond. Nathan, part of the reason I'm in this stream right now is because I heard the exact same thing that CJ said. The first thing that CJ brought up is part of the reason I'm in here, because I heard the exact same type of assertion. So maybe you just misspoke or didn't delineate your position enough, but you kind of had a snarky chuckle before you said these things as well. So don't try and dodge now.
Well, and if I may, and I am.
So I'm not trying to dodge. I'm just saying I haven't said any of the things that. Well,
but hang on though, because you did say that this is. You said that you thought that most of the authors were polytheistic, and you gave as an example of that.
What period did I qualify that with?
Don't make blanket statements. If you actually need to separate them into a specific niche, don't make a blanket statement about.
What was the blanket statement that I made? Because
in general.
Well, hang on though. So can I just?
Well, let's not gaslight, because I recall my own memory, and I recall qualifying it with the vast majority of authors up to the second half of Isaiah. Right, and then I said, and then the sentence I said,
just made that clarification a couple.
Hang on real quick, guys, because I want to make a very important point. I think it's the whole place where we're talking over here really is the Rahab comment, because you said that you thought an example of polytheism was Yahweh fighting Rahab, but that's in the second half of Isaiah, which is in the last 27 chapters, which is Deutero Isaiah, according to modern scholars. Again, I disagree with that, but that's what modern scholars would think.
Which is when I said what? Which is when I said
when you would say that would when they'd start becoming monotheistic, right?
Which is where you see. What was the sentence that I said?
Specifically, so there's actually two, because the second one was a clarifier afterwards. So the first one was that you said that you thought the majority of authors in the Bible were polytheistic, and then you said that you thought that Rahab versus Yahweh was an example of that. And then secondly, you said, I think they get polytheistic up until the second half of Isaiah, implying that the second half of Isaiah would be where you're starting to leave polytheism and go into monotheism. Which, to be fair, I don't think that you're unique in that. I think there's a lot of biblical scholars who would agree with that. But I'm just saying that doesn't that contradict your earlier evidence, though? Because if you're saying this story is an example of polytheism in the Bible, but then you're saying the place where this story is found is where the Bible starts to become monotheistic, that doesn't square. You know what I mean?
I agree that what you're telling me, I believe, doesn't square, but those aren't the things I believe. And
I could absolutely be misunderstanding. That's perfectly fine.
Well, and by the way, Nathan, if you're trying to dodge by what you said in like the last 5 minutes, since I've come on to the stream, then I would agree with you. I'm talking about a blanket assertion you made before I came into the stream.
Well, maybe SJ
that's why I'm saying
SJ could play the stream back, right, and we could listen to exactly what I said, because I don't really appreciate being gaslit.
Well, let's
we're not in any way, shape, or form, or fashion trying to gaslight you, bro. It's a
well, gaslighting is telling someone that their memories are incorrect, telling someone that they're incorrectly remembering the very things that they said and did, and that's precisely what you're doing. Here's what we'll do. Let me just first mention something that makes it clear, because I think there are some distinctions that we make are really important. So it says right here in Joshua 24:15, but if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. Psalm 82 makes it really clear there's a divine counsel. And if you go back and you look at Genesis 6 and you combine that like Michael Heiser's done, you can see that there are these other spiritual beings that are out there, and God gave them authority over these different municipalities. And Jesus reclaimed that. That was part of the reason Jesus came, was to reclaim all of these lands that had been given to the gods who were doing all the wrong things, according to Psalm 82. And so that's what Michael Heiser gets into. And I think that might be somewhat related to what Nathan's talking about. I think that's how he resolves it and remains a Christian. But I don't agree with him that is what's going on in reality. Like I have a different story about how we see these textual things in across the Bible. And what's going on there. Like I think it's because, the people were influenced by their background culture, and were also like figuring out a new theology at the same time, which is what we see happen. Like with the Protestant Reformation, for example, it's nothing new that people sort of do this.
I also want to say hi to Jimmy, who's in here. So hi, Jimmy.
Hello, SJ. Good to talk to you.
Am I still on?
Everybody else.
Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, just wanted to make sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so anyway, I was listening into the open mic thing yesterday on Nathan's channel, and that's sort of what propelled me I was going to make this video when I saw the free will portion with Braxton Hunter, but then I also decided that I would talk about this open mic, so I listened to that. So let me ask you guys the same question that Pine Creek asked, because I thought those were really good questions towards the end. So who do you think among your tribes, who do you think is the most likely Christian who is going to deconvert, or the most likely atheist who's going to deconvert to Christianity?
Yeah, deconvert, right.
I think that's kind of fun. Who do you think? What do you guys, we can go around.
Craig, actually. I think the most likely Christian to become an atheist is probably Inspiring Philosophy, because he's pretty close anyways. I know that might come as a shock to people, but the guy is like, he disbelieves most things in the Old Testament, and actually Sentinel Apologetics too. I know they would take issue with me saying that, and I do say it in love, but the guys, they don't believe most miracles. They don't believe most of Genesis. They don't believe literal, ages, as far as anything that sounds like it's high. That doesn't just include 969 for Methuselah, but 120 for Moses as well, right? Like they basically reject out of hand most of the Old Testament. So I wouldn't.
But that's pretty interesting, CJ, because I mean, it seems like, why couldn't that increase the probability of him retaining theism? Because think of a a young Earth creationist that has an unsophisticated young Earth creationist, right? Like the first time they step into a geology class or biology class, they're going to be like shocked, right? And then then they're going to post their YouTube video about their deconversion, right? I mean, whereas like someone like inspiring philosophy, I think under your view have already kind of rationalized all this away in a way where he's kind of actually more resistant to criticisms, right? Like he doesn't have to deal with the geologist, he doesn't have to deal with the evolution, you know. Like I'm not saying I'm disagreeing with you, but you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, for sure. And actually, honestly, if it was just creation, I don't think I would disagree with your point. And to give an example, you know, like Hugh Ross is a younger or old Earth creationist, right? And Francis Collins is a intelligent design advocate, which basically just means evolution, but God did it. And I don't think either one of them are actually like what I would consider like teetering. Even though I am a young Earth creationist, I take the more fundamentalist view on that, right? Because I do think that there is enough argument to be said, and I know there's enough argument to be said about that because the church fathers had this argument 2,000 years before evolution was discovered, right? There's enough argument to be said within the text about whether or not these are literal 24-hour days, right? So I could grant that, but it's when you move on to other things like, the collapse of the walls at Jericho didn't actually happen, right? Okay, why are you reading this book then? Like, if God doesn't have his hand in Joshua, is it just history? Are you just watching the history of this guy's conquest? And then if there's questions as to whether or not this conquest happened, I mean, sure, you might defend them from a historical perspective, but why would you defend them religiously? I mean, you don't have a serious like attachment to them. You know what I mean?
Would you stop being a Christian if you came to believe that those events didn't happen historically?
Personally, I would. I build my faith in a sort of pyramid-like fashion. In other words, I was convinced of the Old Testament first, New Testament later.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I was the same way, that I studied the Old Testament first, fell in love with it.
Right.
And then later I found out that I really felt my faith shaking when it was historically challenged. But I don't know. I think that for me, that's more psychological, but
yeah. And I hear you there, Danny, because that is sort of my story too, in that, not obviously the end of it, but in that I was infatuated specifically with the Moses story. But
me
then
too.
later,
Wow, we're like twins. Do you know what Bible Study Fellowship? Does anybody know what that is?
Bible Study Fellowship.
It's like an international thing, but they like take sections of the Bible and do it over years. Anyways, I was like put through that when I was a kid, but I loved it. So
for sure.
I think it was funny because I never even read the Bible in full when I was a kid. I just read it recently for the first time, relatively recently, and so I got to say that's not what brought me to Jesus. I think about the early Christians and that kind of thing. They didn't have the New Testament, obviously, and so.
Yeah, and one of my points has always been that if there's no Old Testament, the New Testament is irrelevant. In fact, I mean, just think of the words New Testament, implying that there's something else in the past that you need to be aware of, right? Think of the word Messiah. Okay, God, who's anointed exactly, and how do we know that he's anointed, and why are we even expecting somebody to be anointed, right? So it's like a lot of people like to say our faith is based in Jesus. Our faith is based in Jesus, and that's true, of course, because he is the Savior, right? But if you don't have an Old Testament, Jesus is really just a dude. You know what I mean? He's just a guy who said some cool stuff. But
I want to say hi to Craig Reed too, who just came in. So,
Hi,
sorry, Beckel, I didn't realize.
Can you hear me?
How are you?
Hello, Craig.
Oh, cool, good. I'm in a hotel in New York, so we'll see. We'll see. I've been having trouble with this, but we were good the other 2 weeks ago, right, Stephanie? When I was streaming on your everything was fine. So
yeah, it's working now. I remember you said you got new software or something like that.
Yeah, well, right now though I'm in New York. I'm in the Bronx in a hotel, so we'll see how this goes.
So I got the St. Tommy says Christians hijacked Christmas and Halloween. Ha! Get back. It's funny.
Well, so Nathan, you can you want to retract your accusation of gaslighting?
No.
Okay. Well, then I just went back and watched the stream, and you had made assertions about polytheism multiple times before ever even bringing up Rahab, and so I was not. So my point is, that you made the assertion that I was trying
I'm not
to gaslight
listening
you.
at this point because I need to respond to the first thing
all I'm
that you
asking
said.
is for you to retract the accusation of gaslighting.
Well,
and then we
that
can move
second
on.
sentence is pointless though, because I need to respond to the first bit, so that's just time wasting.
So you're going to dodge again. Got it. Awesome.
Then that was pointless as well. What was it exactly that I said? And furthermore, do you want to communicate like a human, or do you want to just like put on a show for people? I don't know if this is.
I'm
like,
not trying to put on a show.
Issue.
I'm not putting on a show. You accused me of gaslighting.
Yes.
And you claimed that you had different memory of it, and you kept accusing that I'm trying to manipulate people and make you look.
Well, what
bad,
are you
correct?
trying to? What are you telling me that
is that your assertion by claiming that I was gaslighting you versus misremembering, or I don't think so, or you using the word gaslighting? You're making the direct accusation of me trying to manipulate things.
Correct? What would have to be true for you to be gaslighting me?
You're the one that used the word. Why don't you clarify your definition of it?
So for you to be gaslighting me, I would have had to say something which meant something or done something that was different, and you were telling me that I had an incorrect recollection of events and that I said or did something different.
And I stated that you had made the point that they were polytheistic well before you made any kind of delineation about Rahab.
So was the point that I made a sentence that mentioned the word polytheism? Or was it something more specific than that? Was the claim you made?
No, the point was the only reason we're even having this back and forth right now is because you accused me of gaslighting you, which is a false claim.
Yes. Yeah, and I've set out the criteria, right? And now we're going down that road.
Okay, so if you want to pull it up, we can go and listen to it again, or you can just retract your gaslighting accusation and go look it up for yourself later, and you'll see that I'm correct. I wasn't trying to be a jerk.
Yeah, but I'm saying that
the second you accuse me of gaslighting, which is a direct insult and an attempt at proclaiming me as a manipulator, which is a false statement.
What is wrong with you? Like, have you been tested?
Have I been tested for what?
I don't know. Like, that'd be for.
So
well,
if
maybe let's
do you not think that gaslighting is an insult?
Let's just drop this, you guys.
We could move on, or I could go tag Dr. Phil, and we could get him in here.
Dr. Phil.
And we could work this out.
Let's just give this. Actually, I made a video with logical probables. Your testimony, John, I think was very compelling, and I think you were on. I forget whose channel you were on. Were you on Nathan's channel, and that was with Pine Creek, or?
No, that was on.
Your channel. It was on your channel.
On my channel, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But I thought that was a compelling testimony. He made a promise to God and went through kind of some hell at the end of it, and then brought him back to Christianity. So I think that's pretty good.
My thoughts on a Christian that could convert to atheism. I don't think he will because of his platform, as Mike Lacona. I think he has doubts in the back of his mind.
I agree with that, actually.
He takes a very liberal stance on a lot of different passages. Like I'm having Lydia McGrew on my channel on Monday, and Lydia goes to bat against him in her books. It's interesting.
My thing with liberal Christians is you're so close already, like there's so many things you're already not willing to accept. I mean, in some cases you get to the point like, now granted, I know this is like fringe liberal in the case of Brendan Robertson, right? But you do get to that point, right? Where it's like, I don't even actually believe in a literal heaven or hell or Jesus's resurrection or stuff like that. It's just all sort of, nice philosophical words. Or Jordan Peterson, even he's not even considered to be very liberal in his theology, but he's still very metaphorical in it, I guess you could say. And you really like, I really think when you have those, well, to be fair, Spartan theology, the reason for that, I think I've made pretty clear, right, is that I think like you're so close to being there already that it's really like it almost seems like it's just a matter of time. You know what I mean? And in fact, I would not be surprised if most of these people ended up deconverting at some point. Because we've seen a lot of people like this deconvert already, right? Who's the guy who made the I Kiss Dating Goodbye? You guys remember that? Is it like a documentary
or
or book?
Different thing, though. That dude was like, that was the opposite. That guy was like,
well, you're right in that's what he was at first,
like
right?
Very hardcore, like.
But if you listen to his deconversion, Craig, because you are right. In the beginning, he's like super fundamentalist, right? He even writes, right. I kiss dating goodbye, right? Saying like the purity culture is a good thing and all that. But then you start like you read his or actually I listened because I watched a documentary about it, but to his deconversion
did he
story.
like have a process where he became like less like he sort of had a deconversion over a couple of years or something? Because
so he actually first moves from purity culture to liberal Christianity, and then moves from liberal Christianity to deconversion. In other words, the conservative Christianity, right, couldn't go, at least in his mind, a step straight to deconversion. He had to get liberal first and then go to deconversion.
No, there's definitely a trajectory there where people stop believing things, but like you gotta let, like, it depends on what you're talking about. Liberal Christian, like Jordan Peterson, as far as I'm concerned, is on a journey back to Christianity, and it's what people believe, what they actually believe. So I don't know if that made sense.
I want to just jump in here really quickly because I think these comments in the thing are super funny. I didn't know that Spartan Theology, or I don't know if I knew, Spartan Theology considers himself a liberal Christian. He's in the chat. But what about Digital Hammurabi? That's hi there to Digital Hammurabi. He was wondering what about the atheists who are going to go to Christians, and I had put Nathan down.
I have a theory on the atheist end. Rationality rules will be the first of the people that were mentioned. When this came up yesterday. Well, because he's already starting to, like, if you listen to his last video with the Jordan Peterson, the first 8 minutes, he's already starting to do, like, he's noticing that his subconscious mind was helping him when he was driving. He's not saying that's the voice of God. He's like, I have a scientific explanation for it. But he already starts to sound like how I was when I was 25, 26 years old, like connecting dots between things he's actually experiencing. And, that's just a guess. I'm not saying he will. I'm just saying I could see it. Like,
do you think he has too much of a platform to do that? Because he's got an awful lot of followers on YouTube.
Yeah, that's true. Has there ever been like a big switch, like someone with a big, huge platform goes either hallelujah, I'm saved, or hallelujah,
Rhett and Link.
converted?
Yeah, and C.S. Lewis also. I know that's before the internet, but C.S. Lewis was quite popular, and he's actually like a God hater before he became a Christian.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Is that common knowledge?
Yeah, I remember in one of his writings, he said he came into the kingdom kicking and screaming, something like that.
To be fair, though, it's common knowledge if you're a C.S. Lewis fan, but maybe if you're like a general Narnia fan, maybe not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I am a huge fan of C.S. Lewis. His trilemma is one of the reasons I'm a Christian. I mean, I needed to hear that. I really needed to hear that.
Honestly, who I actually find interestingly close to Christianity is Alex O'Connor.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I watched some of that. I watched his thing with Bishop Barron yesterday, and I tend to agree. Go ahead. I cut you off.
Well, no, I mean, I'm kind of glad to hear that you guys agree, because it means that I'm not the only one seeing it. He seems like, especially in his ethical system, honestly, like he kind of assumes so much of what the theist assumes as well, and he has good arguments for it. That it almost seems to me like, in fact, I've made the comment to some of my friends before when watching him. It's almost as if he agrees with the ethics as laid out in the New Testament, and then because of certain things he sees in life, feels that God does not exist and that those ethics aren't being played out.
Right. Animal suffering is his big.
Exactly.
That's what he said is his big objection.
Exactly.
The animal suffering argument. I kind of heard you guys talk about that on Nathan's channel.
Did they go into it? I missed that.
Oh, Digital Hammurabi. He's saying he thinks that you're going to become a Christian, Craig.
Never happened, Josh. They have no evidence, Dr. Josh. As soon as they present me with some evidence, maybe I'll become a Christian. As soon as they
that's not up to you, though.
These sky, I'm not going to believe in their sky fairy until they prove it to me. That's how.
Too bad it's not your decision to make, though.
We do have like 4 atheists in here now, right? Jimmy, you're an atheist as well. Is that correct?
I'm an agnostic.
Agnostic?
Which, I mean, some people would say, I guess, an atheist, but I don't.
Actually, Danny, a lot of money's on Danny as being the first convert, because people think he is a Christian sometimes.
I don't.
Yeah, that's like always I'm always on these atheist streams, like arguing with these atheists, and then everyone just assumes that I was a theist. But
You should
I don't
take
know.
that
I
as a
think I'm pretty far gone.
seriously.
What? Do I take that as a
Take that as a
compliment?
compliment, though, because like they did it to Majesty of Reason, Joe Schmidt. He's so good at steelmanning Christian positions that when he was on Shannon's channel, the atheists in the live chat were, "Who is this theist? Get him off of here! This guy Skyfall." They were freaking out because they thought he was a Christian. But that's just because he's so good at steelmanning, like the arguments for God.
Yeah, I was a Christian, and I was really interested in Christian apologetics. So it does bother me when people strawman
tend
each
to
other.
play devil's advocate with atheists.
Well, I don't know. I don't do that. I argue for what I think is true, but
but you're good at some of your positions are pro-theist in nature, and you're good at defending them. So people think you're Christian or theist.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
So welcome to Otangelo. He's also here.
Yeah, hello everyone.
Hi there.
Hello, Otangelo.
So and one thing I will say real quick, I do just want to, I have noticed that does tend to be a lot of people's way of saying they respect you and think you're honest, is that X person will probably convert to my view.
Yes,
I've seen it of myself 100,000 times in comment sections. And I've learned to just, I understand what they mean. What they're saying is they obviously agree with their view, so they don't want to say anything like I'm right or anything like that. What they're saying is that they respect me as an interlocutor and find me to be honest. And so I just take it as a compliment.
They're saying you're a reasonable version of a Christian or you're a reasonable version of an atheist. So they can't imagine that you won't become one or the other. Right.
I get these letters every once in a while, emails from people that are kind of anonymous emails from these people who they'll listen to my video and then they'll send me an email that says something like, you have no good reasons to be a Christian. Actually, you see it in the comments too. You have no good reasons. There's no good evidence. So you need to just give it all up now. And I'm like, why would people try to a lot of people realize I'm not going to try to talk you out of Christianity because most people, if you follow Christianity to its logical outcomes and try to act like Jesus, you'll be a pretty decent person. You're not going to be perfect, but you certainly can be a better person in some ways.
Yeah, theoretically.
Exactly what I was saying before. That if there was anything in any of the tenets of Christianity that asserted that Christians are to imprison non-believers or cut off their heads or deliberately insult them, then that's one thing. But there's none of that is expressed anywhere by any of the apostles or the Christ himself. So when I see people going on these campaigns and these tours around the world trying, to tell people to not believe in Jesus, it just seems utterly futile to me.
Michael. Oh, go ahead.
No, I will say that I woke up like 30 minutes ago and I went on my YouTube, live streams, whoever was live, and then I saw Free Will, and it was like Christmas, man. I got out of my bed, I put on, sure, I was like, and then I got bamboozled here. Were y'all talking about free will before?
I was at the beginning.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. Yeah, they did. This was originally titled Free Will, and that's what I did too.
Not that this is not enjoyable, but I'm just saying that.
That's what's happened with Stephanie. Yes, free will. This was titled Free Will.
It's like with research papers at my school. I've been known to kind of skip around topics a lot. Like I'll be really interested. A few years ago, I was really interested in psychological entitlement, and then my subject left. The person who was working for me at that time left, so then I was no longer interested in psychological entitlement. Now I'm into coaching, so I tend to do that. I'm sorry about that. I move around quite a bit.
No, I was just curious. I don't think you put Nathan in as a likely candidate to go back to Christianity.
Yeah, I think he's the most likely out of the group. I put Pine Creek in just as a joke. I really don't think Pine Creek is going to go back. But Nathan, I think Nathan is a really good candidate. I think once Nathan and V get married and have some kids.
Jesus, I hope she's not listening.
I don't think so. I disagree. I disagree, but
yeah, I don't know. I think if my depression were to continue to get as bad as it was when I was like 18, then that could push me towards Christianity. But other than that, I don't think.
Yeah, I would be the same way at this point, based on how I know myself. If I could just be caused to believe because of practical reasons, the happier life, meaningful life, whatever it is. But you know, I don't feel like, I think the epistemic reasons are just not there for me.
Craig, I think your phone might be doing the one that's doing a little bit of clicking in the background.
Really?
Just a little bit, but I'm just wondering if.
Nathan, I can just tell you from personal experience, as an agnostic, I lean towards God existing. My kids pray at night, and I pray with them too. Like last night, I had to explain to my son that he shouldn't pray to God for things, like to just to get things done, you know, like, oh God, give me this bike, you know. And so when you have those interactions with your kids, it does make you think and make you lean towards something's going on. So that should be interesting as you grow, if you do have kids.
Yeah,
I
don't
heard.
know if. Oh, sorry, SJ.
Oh, I was going to say Michael Heiser said something really interesting. I was listening to him too yesterday, and he said this because he was saying why does the bad side, like, you know, there's the good guys and the bad guys or whatever. Evil's a corruption of good. Satan fell from heaven. That whole kind of thing. He says, why does Satan and his minions, why do they keep fighting this fight if they know that eventually they're going to lose? And Michael Heiser said something I never really thought about, and he's like, it's because they know that they can prolong this war, and that's what they're doing now. They're trying to prolong this their existence. So I thought, I never thought of that.
I mean, if Jesus wanted to return tomorrow, do you think Satan could prevent that by extending the war?
No.
Like no. It just seems. I don't even mean I don't even mean granting it's true, like how silly they are. I mean, it just doesn't make make sense as a worldview. That right, like how could they can't extend?
I don't think he could prevent
it. Point of view. Yeah,
I think it's God. You know, it's one of the things is if you look at the percentage of people who are Christian in the world, you can see that over the last 2,000 years, it just keeps growing to a bigger and bigger percentage of people. And I'm curious if at some point, you know, we've got 8 billion people almost on the planet. We've got 2 billion Christians. At some point, are we going to see 8 billion Christians and 8.1 billion people on the planet or something? Is that ever going to happen? And I wonder if that's what God's working towards, which would give us a lot of time.
Of these 2 billion people, about 1 billion or 1,200,000 are Catholics. And if you take all the Protestant confessions, about I don't know, there are in Europe. The Protestant church is an official church like the Catholic Church. But if you go to investigate how many actually actively practice their religion and actually have a relationship with the Lord, then it is a very small percentage, maybe 1 or 1.5%, or maximally 2. So I would take these 2 billion with a lot of with a grain of salt. You know,
that's actually a good point. There are a lot of nominal Christians out there. I don't know the percentage, but you're right.
It's not South American Catholicism in particular.
Well, in Brazil, there was a huge percentage Catholics, but it has shifted to evangelicals. But what I see here is that a lot of the prosperity gospel has grown. So people which are poor, they are looking to solve their problems, and they approach their faith with often a mix of wrong motivations. And of course, they can grow out of this, but that has also to be taken into consideration. And that is also a problem in Africa. In Africa, you see the export of American prosperity gospel is very popular in Africa, and we see many of these kinds of over there.
That's a real shame, actually.
Yes, it is. So I would say that what Christ said, that it is always a very small percentage of the overall populations which finds the small door. We see that reflected in the entire history of humankind, I would say, and it isn't different now. I mean, there are countries like South Korea which have a real good percentage of true born-again Christians. In China, we see that the gospel is growing. There are about, they say, 100 million Christians there, and they are persecuted. They are underground churches. So if they are confessing Christ, they really are Christians, because otherwise they would deny it, because it's not convenient at all to confess to be a Christian there. And many are in concentration camps. Religions are actively being oppressed because it's a communist state, and they want to have their communist doctrine
propagated,
imposed to the population. So they actively fight religions. We see that also with the Uyghurs, with the Muslim. There are huge number of people in concentration camps, and I think this is not only of the visual of which we are aware of, but I've read reports where Christians are also in concentration camps, and we don't know about these things, and it's really sad. It's very bad. So.
I agree with you. I've had a Dr. Michael Brown on my channel before, and he talked about how when they go out and do conversions in certain places of the world, they have to let the Christians know this might not go well for you. They convert and they might end up losing their lives because of it.
Yes.
So there's some dangerous places like Egypt. I mean, all those people who were beheaded, the Coptic Christians on the beach by Muslims, that's terrible. And Christians are kidnapped a lot of times in places like Nigeria by the Boko Haram. I mean, it's not a good deal to be Christian in a lot of places.
Yeah, I mean, I think many are not aware of it, that we talk about persecution of the early Christians of the first 300 years in the Roman Empire, but actually in terms of numbers, the persecution of Christians today is much more severe in certain parts, special Muslim parts of the world, than any time in history before. So,
Yeah, no, good points. So we've got about 10 minutes. I can keep going. Did you guys want to move back to free will or talk about anything in particular?
Danny's dying to.
No, not in 10 minutes. You can't do justice to it.
You could choose to, right now.
Is way too long.
I would like to.
Yeah, you can choose. Right.
I would like to real briefly just not to derail this to use for my own personal gain, but Nathan, I'm interested, if you'd be interested, in having a conversation about evolution through the text. Not a debate, but just like a one-on-one discussion, if you'd be interested in something like that.
Yeah, I'm sure we could do that at some point. I don't know, like just message me on Twitter or something, and we can.
For sure.
Hey, Danny, if you want to, I've got a little bit of time. If SJ has to wrap up in 10 minutes, we can go talk free will on my channel if you want to.
Yeah, that sounds good. We can do that.
I might even hop over there too, because I'm off today and I have nothing to do.
I see. What I need to do is paint a bathroom and paint a hallway, and so I got some projects I'm working on in my house, and so I've set the goal of painting my entire house. I got a kind of a big house, I should say, so I got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, LPP, I'll probably tune in as well. I'm off today as well, so I'll probably tune in.
Well, okay. So you guys we'll stay here. Do you guys want me to go ahead and set up a stream? Everybody just bounce over there when SJ wraps up.
I'll be listening to it while I'm painting. So
yeah,
for
set
sure.
the stream up. Yeah.
How long have you been painting?
Okay, I'll set it up.
What's that?
How long have you been painting?
Appreciate you.
Well, I started yesterday. I painted this room that I'm in right now, and so that took all day.
It's a really good background.
Oh yeah, no, I've got a green screen, but I've got
I'm
a
kidding.
real green screen behind me.
Yeah.
But no, I painted this room this really pretty color. It's kind of like a light gray, and then I've got these. I've got some other colors, like a really light aqua color for other rooms, and some pretty. I mean, I'm pretty excited about changing the whole look of the house. We're just ordered new carpet for this room. I'm using my stimulus check.
Hey, look, my dog.
Hey. Hey, attention.
So, SJ, are you taking advantage of your children to fund reconstruction on your house? Is that what's happening right now?
Oh yeah, well, I used my other check last year to put a whole new paint job on the outside, and then I used this really good my insurance company ended up buying me a brand new roof. So I mean, this is a good deal.
Nice. No, I was joking that. So I don't claim my daughter on my taxes. And,
oh, you don't? How old's your daughter?
She's 10. I don't have her 6 months in one day, so I can't legally. But I was joking with I was giving my sister a hard time because all of her kids are now over 18. so I was like, so last year you guys got some nice little checks, and she's like, well, actually, yes, it was nice. Yeah, but now that they're over 18, they didn't qualify, I guess, with the next one.
Yeah, no, there's supposed to be more money coming for kids too. So
yeah. I mean, I was cracking those on folks. I'm like, yeah, how's that like $6,000 you got? Like, congratulations,
Yeah. So it's a good deal. So anyway, you guys, let's go around and just say what you're working on now, if you can share, and then we can just close this out and you guys can go over to LPP, and I'll be listening to that while I'm painting. So just to let you know, but maybe we'll start with Veckel or just the order you came in here. Actually, now that I think about it, Nathan came in first, then Veckel, and so we'll go. So what are you working on now?
Did you say I'm going first? Sorry, SJ.
Yeah, or where can people find you is another thing to add.
Yeah, my channel's called Digital Gnosis, and in a couple of hours' time, I'm interviewing Philip Goff, who teaches philosophy over at Durham, who's a panpsychist. So we're going to be talking about his book, Galileo's Error. I think in a week's time, we've got Luke Barnes and James Fodor, who are going to be having a discussion on fine-tuning, both educated in physics, amongst other things, Luke Barnes being a Christian. And then a couple of weeks after that, I'm interviewing a guy at the Uni of Manchester over here, who's a biologist on the brain. And yeah, other than that, we've got more about apologetics episodes planned, and anything else spurious, sort of off the cuff, open conversations and things. So if people are interested, they can head over for that.
Great. And I want to say I'm going tomorrow on Evidence and Reason's channel, Sal's channel. So I'll be on there. So that's wonderful. Veckel.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? Make sure.
We sure can.
No. Okay. Yeah, nothing much going on my channel. I just pop into other people's live streams and start trouble there. I'm currently working on my cartoon, which I've been working on for about 10 years now. And currently, even right now as we speak, I'm working on episode 12, the last episode. So you can go to my channel, check that out if you want. And just that's about it. To God be the glory.
Yes, agreed. So who came next? I think it was Synagogue.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate you. I thank everybody also for talking. This is a pretty solid conversation. So obviously my channel is the Synagogue. If anybody wants to check it out, I do apologetics there. I do have a news program podcast sort of thing, like political talk show that I do there. But I'm going to split those into two different channels. So I'm trying not to advertise that one so much, at least not on the Synagogue, because obviously politics and religion are different enough that they should be separate channels. Nonetheless, I do Christian apologetics debates, open rooms. My unapologetics podcast is what I do primarily. And in the future, what we're having actually is going to be really, really cool. I'm going to have an interview with Dr. David Roll on Thursday, April 15th. If anybody is aware of, I think he's a doctor. I don't know if he's actually a doctorate, but anyways, if anybody's aware of patterns of evidence, he's the main scholar behind the technology.
Good.
So yeah, I'm gonna have an interview with him on 8 a.m. My time, and that'll be April 15th for anybody who's interested. And then I'm also gonna have an interview with a church historian named Bruce Gore the following week. And he's not going to be refuting anything Dr. Roll is saying, but he is going to be presenting the more conventional chronology version of a Exodus. And many people watch Bruce Gore online here. He's got 24,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel. I'll be having both of those on my channel here soon, and potentially also a couple other conversations with Chris Date and I don't know, maybe even Nathan. I guess we'll see if that happens.
Hey, CJ, real quick, could you please leave your link? Because I've been meaning to subscribe to your channel for the longest time, but I can't find it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me grab that right now, actually.
I got to find links to all of your channels and put them in the chat. I got to try to do that. I think all of you have channels, if I'm not mistaken. So let's see. Who is next? I think LPP came in next, if I'm not.
Just threw it in the chat, Veckel. Sorry.
So John put the link in there to get onto his chat. Anything else you want to mention, John?
No, I mean, As always, I tell people that I think there's a dramatic lack of open-minded analysis of what is the actual evidence in favor of God, not just from a purely philosophical perspective, purely from a biological perspective and scientific one, but from a cumulative case aspect. And I find that a lot of folks seem to get hyper focused on just one element, and then, oh wait, well, I can find a way around this one little piece, therefore I'm just going to dismiss everything, rather than looking at it as a mosaic painting versus one individual tile of that mosaic. And I think when you take the time to look at it from a much bigger picture perspective, take the step back, it's very difficult to conclude that at a minimum it is more probable that a God exists. But yeah, so we'll when all this wraps up, I've got everything set up on my channel. Post the links in the chat, and both if you want to be on the conversation as well as if you just want to join. But SJ, thanks so much for always hosting awesome streams.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent. So
Okay, I
Danny,
see how it is. Okay. I thought you were
Danny, were you next?
I thought you were about to skip me, and I was going to get on.
Oh no.
Yeah, I just started a new channel in January. It's called Phil Talk, and if you Google it, since it's like a nobody chat, you won't find it. So you're gonna have to find a link. Good luck with that. But I've been reviewing I reviewed a deconversion story. I think GMO, what's GMS? Genetically Modified Skeptic. Is that it? I reviewed his deconversion story. I did that last night. I reviewed Braxton Hunter's 10 Questions for Atheists. I reviewed his moral argument. Then I also have some videos on just general philosophy terms, so you don't have to be an atheist or theist to enjoy those, amongst other stuff. So y'all should subscribe. I'm a graduate student. I have a bachelor's in philosophy, so I'm really into philosophy.
Are you working on a PhD? Somebody said that.
A master's, and then I think I might get. I don't know. It depends. There's no PhD program where I live, so I have to move for that. And I'm considering it, but I'm not so sure. I would have to move out of the state.
Okay, great. Yeah, go over. You guys make sure you get to all these channels. I did watch a really interesting thing on your channel. I'm trying to remember what it was, but I remember you're interviewing somebody.
Tim Stratton.
Oh yeah, Tim Stratton. That was really good. So yeah, go watch that too. Jimmy.
Oh, holy Lord. What am I doing? Well, I don't really do anything on my YouTube channel. I'm kind of like Veckel. I just jump in when I can, when I'm not doing anything. I'd like to start some content up. I haven't really pinned down what I want to do. There's so much reaction videos. I thought I could do reaction videos of the reactions. So I could do, a reaction of the reaction of SJ reacting to the free will videos. Just a satire,
That sounds good. Do it.
Make it funny for everybody. But I am on Instagram. I do a lot of coin collecting, buying and selling over there. It's JWright34 if anybody is on there and wants to add me. Besides that, not much. I enjoyed talking with everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, welcome on. And Tangelo, he's been on here a couple times too.
Yes, I have yesterday night reviewed a stream of Michael Shermer. He was on another YouTube channel. And I asked him there how we can explain our existence without a creator. And I think his answer was pretty interesting. And I reviewed it at my channel, The God Talk. So if you guys want to have a look there, and that's basically it for now.
Great. I don't know if I've subscribed to your channel because I don't remember seeing God Talk. So I'm going to go ahead and try to find that too. So,
okay.
Well, good. Well, you guys, everybody, thank you so much for coming on today. You guys, please like, subscribe, run over to John Maddox's channel right now. He put the link in the chat, and a lot of this is going to continue. So I'm going to be listening in over there. So you guys have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
See you guys.